pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome back tonight after a long night last night.
We have enough rest.
This meeting is a public work session where the board will hear a variety of reports and have discussion regarding topics which may be scheduled for official action at a future meeting. During this meeting, we will not be voting or making the final decision on any topic. Questions and comments by members of the audience will be limited to those topics on the agenda this meeting. This meeting is being videotaped for community cable channels. Individuals attending this meeting and intending to speak to the board should be aware that they are being videotaped. Thank the young gentlemen who did a great job in getting the equipment back over tonight. They've been back and forth to handle the mock Republican convention over at the high school. And again, thanks guys for doing a great job.
And let's make sure we get it back over to high school first thing in the morning.
In order to meet the requirements of Pennsylvania Sunshine Law, it is necessary to record the names of all citizens who speak to the board during the meeting. To assure compliance with this requirement, it is essential that those planning to address the board come to the microphone and state their name and address. Members of the audience are asked to limit their questions and comments to no more than 3 minutes. This limit will permit time for all of those who wish to speak to the board. Whenever members of the audience exceed this time limit, I may ask the individual to yield the microphone to the next speaker. Have some goals for tonight is to, again, get through this agenda. And a goal is to get through the agenda before 10 o'clock. And in saying that, I'm going to add that I plan to go through everything that's on the agenda and have an audience of citizens at the end of the complete agenda. We have a lot to do, again, as you all may see, and there's going to be a lot of discussion, so therefore we'll have audience of citizens at the end. Tonight we will be discussing facilities and finance, and the first item on the agenda is the addition to the North Penn High School. I'd like to turn this portion over to Dr. Bose.
Mr. President and members of the board, the proposal before you offers a concept. It is not considered unique or out of the ordinary, but it does consider that our options perhaps are down to little or none, or maybe it's little and one. That we consider other options, and they have not met with favor with this Board of Education, and it is this Board of Education that has an opportunity now to make a decision, and if done in the near future, perhaps have a facility ready to receive enrollment that we expect to exceed the current capacity of North Penn High School and reach into the 3,300s before the turn of the century. And so without being too repetitious or redundant on a concept, I think that our guests, as well as the Board of Education and members of the staff, already understand. Let me merely deal with the highlights and perhaps spend most of the time on any questions that might ensue. What is being proposed then is an addition to North Penn High School. We might call it a pod, we might call it a new standalone facility, but by any other name, it's still a form of an addition to North Penn High School. The advantage of it being a standalone addition is that it would cause the least disruption to North Penn High School, which must still be operated for a large student body until an additional facility to relieve that growth is built nearby. So that's one of the key advantages of this concept. It's being proposed for 800 students, and the 800 is simply considering what we expect current enrollments to be in 1999 or the year 2000. Those enrollment influences are are considered by simply looking at the students now in the first, second, and third grade. And that total already exceeds 3,200. And also looking at the mid-range or the moderate projections done by Pell a few years earlier. The projections, in fact, that we talked about last night when we were looking at elementary school enrollments. I recognize and I don't suggest that we sidestep the fact that this is a political decision. It's a political decision because it's a decision to spend a considerable amount of additional money. At the same time, I think the board recognizes that we have a considerable enrollment problem that has to be met, or we could be courting disaster without some kind of plan and alternatives that are far more unacceptable than this one. And so it is recommended that the board consider authorizing the employment of an architect who would develop a plan. And the plan should consider the standalone concept because of the ease of construction and the least disruption, but it also should consider a rational approach to improving other features of North Penn High School as we now know it, so we protect an already big investment in a facility we already own. And that may mean things as simple as a new roof, moving the clinic from the second floor to the first floor for obvious safety and access reasons, and a host of other matters that are on a list prepared for the Board of Education and which will be reviewed tonight by either Mr. Wood or Dr. Bond. But let me review again what the critical implications and advantages to this concept may be if it were approved and implemented through the planning stage with the services of an architect. I've already mentioned construction would be far easier because of the disruption impact. The community would retain its identity with one high school and not splitting into two high school camps. We also are recommending that the board consider acquiring additional land nearby, if for no other reason than the additional parking spaces that may be required, and certainly the playing fields that a high school with a student enrollment the size of the one we contemplate would need. We also believe that there's an easy way to deal with the congestion problems created by the pod design that North Penn High School now features. And that might be a hallway concept built outside the current facility that might connect some of the pods as well as the new standalone facility. We've done some work on calculating how that might be incorporated and what it might cost. Obviously, staying with one high school foregoes a need to make two staffs, where there's now one, keeps the student body, its academic and its athletic traditions in place. We may be able to use most of the core features of an already large high school without duplicating them as we would have with the second high school. And we believe once operating, the operational costs, which are yearly budget items that are consumed every year, are reduced because one high school is, after all, less expensive to operate than two high schools. And, let me ask Mr. Wood if he would review for you again what you already know. We projected a timeline, assuming you might wish to consider this matter as early as this month, or any time thereafter. The timeline could be moved back correspondingly a month. And he's projected some costs for the list of approvals to North Penn High School as it now stands, plus any other information that would be useful and helpful for the board's consumption and consideration. And then I think we should hear from Dr. Juan Vaughn. And let me say that there's a lot of discussion about acquiring additional enrollment capacity analysis. And in my experience, whenever I've done that elsewhere and employed such services independent of what the staff itself did, we usually found somebody like a Juan Bond and paid that person. Well, Juan Bond knows North Penn High School like no other expert could, having been its principal for 9 years and having seen the enrollment grow and the impacts on the building in 1996. Now, when I left high school in 1959, high school was a different experience for American teenagers. There were no handicapped children in my high school. There were no handicapped children in my school district. Because in 1959, unless you were a mongoloid, Down syndrome unfortunate individual, no one recognized any kind of handicap. Now we have handicaps we didn't even know existed 5 years ago, let alone 35 years ago. So enrollments are influenced by the nature of the program you must or you choose to operate, and that's why I suggested Juan Bond is as much of an expert as anybody we could find on the national scene, because he knows this facility and he's also seen what's happened to public education and secondary education, particularly throughout his career. And so Dr. Bond would add whatever words of encouragement are needed to prepare this community and this Board of Education to make a critical decision in the near future. I'll pause now and ask Mr. Wood if he had comment, and followed by Dr. Bond, and then we'll certainly take questions.
On January 15th, 1996, I prepared for the board a projected time frame for the construction of an addition to North Penn High School. At that time, we were looking at a time frame, and Mr. Weir, I don't have copies for the audience. I don't know whether you want to have this time frame. Yeah.
You want me to make some?
Well, I think it would be helpful. I mean,
Ken, you want me to make some? Please.
make these too.
Is your machine on?
Yes.
Thank you.
We get them.
Board members at the time received this document, as well as the people in the audience when we discussed it at a prior meeting, I believe on February 8th. We looked to an appointment of an architect by the school Board of School Directors in the month of March 1996. And then thereafter, we looked at June 1996 for the submission of a Plan Con A or B, A and B, which is really a project justification and schematic plans. In September 96, we would come back with a Plan Con D, and that would be our cost estimates. And in October of 96, we would then approve Plan Con E, which is the design development drawings. And hopefully in the same month, October 96, we would do an Act 34 hearing. After the Act 34 hearing, there is a long period of time required for the actual preparation of the construction documents prior to going bid. We had anticipated, and that, of course, the construction documents are Plan Con F, and we had anticipated a time frame from October 96 until June of 97 to put the construction documents together. In July of 1997, they would be released for bid, and in August 97, we would receive bids, and in September of 1997, we would award contracts, and of course, in October of 1997, commence construction. We all know that with construction beginning in October, much of your success as to how you proceed is predicated on the kind of weather you have through the winter when you're doing concrete pours and so forth. We looked with this schedule, and once again commencing construction in October of 1997, we looked for substantial completion in July of 1999 and the building would be occupied in September of 1999. We did talk about the need with a secondary building, and we're experiencing that. The time that it takes to move into a secondary building is a little bit different than an elementary building, so we would like to have substantial completion in July so that we can be ready to occupy in September. A footnote on my original time frame would indicate that between April of '96, which would be this coming April, and the time of bid award, we would be into ongoing planning and negotiations with various agencies, including, and probably our longest time frame would be with Tohomenson Township in obtaining the necessary land development approval and putting together a land development plan, and then, of course, getting the necessary permits so that we could begin the work in a timely fashion. That is a projected time frame. I have a comfort level with that as far as the actual construction is concerned. Questions regarding that? Fred, do we have copies for the audience?
We're getting more made.
Good.
That's just for
Thank
the
you.
board right now.
Having gone through that, if you have questions, I certainly will attempt to answer them. We know we do elementary buildings. We did Walton Farm in 12 months. I don't think we ever want to face that time frame again. We did Bridle Path in 14 months. But when you're into a secondary building and you're working around, and I don't mean an occupied building as much as I do an occupied site, although with the kitchen and cafeteria addition, it will be necessary to work that in 2 summers, possibly 1 summer, but we're gonna need the 2 summers to do much of the work that will be required as it relates to the total project.
Question. You'd given us also a cost estimate for capital improvements at the high school.
Yeah, and as soon as I have that here, and as soon as we get adequate copies, I don't have copies for the audience, and I would like them to be able to follow along, and we could talk openly.
I don't want to speak to any particular item right at this time. There's more or less a general question as to time frame and doing the work. If some of this work could be combined with the construction at the high school, if we elect to go that way. My question is, how does that affect this time schedule, or can this be rolled together, or some of this work under the same contractor, or how do you subdivide?
I would prefer to take the list that I prepared for you dated February 9th. I prefer to take that and do that separately, Don, for many reasons. For an example, there are a number of items here that we would write the spec for in-house. So I don't want to pay an architect to do that. And there are a number of items as we begin to prioritize that we would want to have control of. I don't want to make it part of the overall process. And the other thing that you'll recognize on this list, although there aren't that many of them, but anything under $25,000 would not involve prevailing wage. So if you look at the painting of the existing orange fascia system, where I have that estimated at $24,000, and you begin to look down at the drive-it over to where the plexiglass panels existed at $17,500, and the lockers in the locker room at $22,000, you're doing all of that work, and the replacement doors, you're doing all the replacement doors, although they appear to be more, I would phase those over 2 summers.
My question is, that makes sense, and I have no problem with that. I guess my question is more related to relocating the health suite or converting industrial arts laboratories and upgrade the entire building or the roof. I don't know if you intend to do the roof yourself, but
No.
those type of things, I thought from the discussion we had previously, the relocating the health suite seemed to be a major concern.
That would be part of the contract as it relates to, I would prefer to make that a part of the contract as it relates to the addition.
That's my point.
Yeah.
Some of these items on this list then would be rolled into that,
That is true.
into that work.
There wouldn't be a lot of them, but that's one that I would prefer to do, only from an architectural standpoint, choice of finishes, choice of material. I don't want it to look like it is an add-on. I'd want to bring it into the overall process.
And I guess the items I'm really kind of referring to is the M, N, and O on the list.
Yeah, the health suite would be one. Industrial arts laboratory, for those of you that have had an opportunity to go to Penfield and Penbrook, they were done in-house. We would prefer to do those in-house. The conversions at Brook and Field, which have received quite a bit of recognition statewide with visits from architects and so forth, we did the design, we did the work. So I would prefer to do N in-house. And of course, O is going to be an ongoing process, and a lot of that can be done by our staff.
More questions? Yeah.
Sure.
We'll open it up for some questions to Art. And then I think Dr. Bose, we wanted to have Dr. Bond comment. So let's have some questions for Art.
Okay, Art, looking at your timeline here, I'm assuming that you would, of course, continue to act as clerk of the works on the matter. When we were doing Walton Farm, I can't think of the name of the construction group that came in and operated as a taskmaster.
Right. We were the first school district in the Commonwealth to bid that, which was an interesting process, and now more people are bidding it. And we, of course, took the low bid, and that was Lot. They're no longer in the
That's
business,
right.
but the person we had is with a new firm working out of the Lot office and has just been assigned to the new Archdiocese High School in Chester County. But he happened to be a very outstanding young man that really, we work together well, and George has a lot of ability. I talked to some people today in relationship to that project that he's assigned to now, but I wouldn't see in this
So I
kind
might
of a
understand that you
project-
want to bring that back.
I wouldn't want to bring it back.
You don't want to bring it back. We don't need that.
It's the only time that
Okay.
we've ever used
I
it.
think
We've done.
you need
we-
to clarify
Right.
why you went to construction. as
I
if
used the
you were running
we used the
Bridle Path.
construction manager because I was the construction manager at Bridle Path,
Okay,
and we had two projects going concurrently.
right.
But I think if you look back, that's the only time we used a construction manager, and I guess we've managed some $70 million worth of construction. So I have a
Okay, so that's an
confidence.
expense we don't have to look for, even though there's a certain amount of expeditiousness that's needed on this time schedule. We don't need a construction manager, and you would handle that.
We would do that.
Good, good. Mr. President, that's all the questions I have. Thanks, Art.
How about more questions for Art?
Art, you mentioned here in the capital improvements, $1997. I'm assuming that you are, I shouldn't assume, that I'm asking you, I've probably built some inflation in there.
I used,
So if we-
doing my takeoffs and getting my cost estimates, I did use $1997.
So if we were to give you the go-ahead now, or within the next month or so, these figures could even be a little bit less.
Well, it depends what the process is.
If we contract them now,
We won't make the summer, I'm afraid, to get out the bid and do the specs. I mean, I could take some of these. I would probably immediately replace the overhead door, small item, of course. I would try to go to bid for a summer replacement of the water softener, the water conditioning system. I would want to be up and ready to change the cooling tower this winter. I mean, we have a Baltimore air coil cooling tower, and I had a recent conversation with them. They typically give a 15 to 17-year life. They're aware of our maintenance program. They give us a 22-year life, and here we are far beyond that. So I don't want to wait on the cooling tower, but I need to do it in a non-cooling season. So that would be next winter.
but what I'm saying is if we move
We
expeditiously
could
on
save
this
some
and we give you the go-ahead, we could save something off this 2.6 million.
Yes. And I do reflect on the back in the 2.6, a total architectural fee, and whatever we do in-house, you will not face that architectural fee. I mean, we typically spec our own replacement interconnect telephone systems. We've done that at Brookfield and Dale, and here, at this building, so we would do that in-house.
So you're saying it shouldn't be any more than 2.6?
Should not be.
What will stay on this side?
Art, how we fixed for electricity in the high school?
Electricity is, we have adequate electricity because we brought a new line in from Town Pike a number of years ago. We do and always have had a concern about the fact that both the high school and at Hatfield that we do have Federal Pacific switchgear, and they have not enjoyed the greatest reputation, but that's something I just would recommend going out and replacing for the sake of replacing. It's no longer being manufactured. We bought a considerable number of replacement parts, and, I can't honestly recommend that you replace the
I
switchgear.
wasn't necessarily referring to the switching equipment,
We
but
have-
the adequacy
We
of
have
power.
the adequacy. Now, we'll need to do some, as it relates to your committee or to the technology committee, we're gonna need to do some routing out into the building. I mean, we looked at converting the other day, I met with Lou, and we looked at converting the language lab to a computer lab, which was a marvelous idea, and that was Dr. Bond's idea, and luckily, when I started looking for electric, we found 100 amp. Now, 100 amp is marginal. One of the things that has happened, and it's going to have a real influence on everything we do in technology, we used to deal in milliamps, if you will, with PCs. We're now running 5 or 6 amps per PC. So if you have 6 amps and you use an easy number, you put 30 workstations in, you need 180 amps. And for most of us that have 200 amps in our house, to run that lab, it takes basically 200 amps to do that. So we're gonna face some things as we begin to put these new labs in. We're looking at putting a new lab in at Brook and Field now, and we're running in-house. We're running new power to it. But it's not as though you could go in before and have a couple of dedicated 20 amp circuits. You really need to have more oomph than you've ever had in the past. So that's a consideration, and that will certainly be reflected in the long-range plan as it comes back through the cooperation between facilities and technology and finance.
It's like an afterthought, right?
Sharice? Nothing right now? Okay, we'll come back. Over this side, any questions for Art at this point?
I don't have a question, I'd just like to thank you for this nice report that helps put things in perspective for us.
We
It's a
think,
big help. Thank you.
we think we have covered everything. We do have a concern, sometimes and Dave Kelly's here in the audience, the gentleman that runs the high school, we kind of stay awake at night. I mean, how do you know when something's gonna die? We have the original hot water heater in there. It's not a big deal, but I don't have it reflected here. The original hot water that makes our domestic hot water for the entire locker room area. And it's original. We've maintained it well, but I can't guess when it's gonna die, and that's something that you have a contingency for, and that's why we have a contingency.
Art, since I just have a question on the roof, I thought I saw at an earlier time a guesstimate.
You did.
I think it was at least $2 million.
It was $2 million. A couple of things have happened, Tom. That reflects, we have, interestingly enough, 245 square feet of roof, and that's a big roof. A number of things have happened. Carlisle and Goodyear prices have come down, believe it or not. And the other thing, in my initial estimate, I reflected, not knowing when we would do it, total rip-offs. We will not do a rip-off. We'll roof over the existing roof. We've done that in all of our other buildings with good success. The only time you don't do that is if you have saturation and moisture, you lose the R factor of any insule that you have, and it's not prudent to roof over a wet roof. Right now, we're dry. We spent about $5,200 last year maintaining that roof. But when a hot build-up roof goes, it goes. I mean, it just starts like that. And that's why we know we're beyond any normal lifetime of a roof. This community just got a marvelous bargain when they put that roof on that high school. Because really, even though we opened in '71, the roof went on in 1970. So we're far out on any kind of life expectancy on a roof such as that roof. But by not doing a rip-off And we will pick up an R factor. We would actually just go around, put wood blocking that is just a 2x laid flat and fill in with insole and adhere the rubber right over the insole. It's gonna be a big job, the roof. People have asked about doing it in phases. I prefer not to because of the cost of mobilization and bonds and everything related. It's like bidding the roof twice if you want to phase it. I would rather there are areas where we can work on that building, even if we're running late in September or October, where we're not going to be that disruptive. I mean, we could work over the auditorium, we could work over the gym. So there are some areas we would phase it in areas of importance, but hold those areas if we thought we weren't going to make it in a full summer. We need to, if kids get out on the 14th of June, roofing crews have to be there on the 15th. I mean, the material has to be stocked, lifted by crane onto the roof so it's there and ready to go, but then we really have to start working the day school's out. It's a big roof.
Art, did you get a lot of phone calls on this roof? I don't know about the other board members, but when that $2 million figure for the roof hit the newspapers, I think every roofer in the East Coast must have picked up the phone. You know, how do I get on that list?
We'll have lots of bidders.
Unlike any other thing in this district where, you know, a dollar amount was put in there, I've heard from more roofers than
It's a big job.
attorneys.
They'd like to have it. I mean, it's a nice job, and
It is a nice
with it
job.
not being a rip-off, one of the things with a rip-off, you can imagine how many 30-yard dumpsters it takes to haul that roof away. So in our initial cost, we were reflecting a rip-off. I'm not recommending that, and I hope that we move fast enough that we don't have to do that.
You've heard from locals? You have locals on that list?
Yeah.
As work,
Yeah,
as
there's a
it comes
couple
up?
of big locals on that list, too.
Good, good.
Arthur, how long will it take, actually, estimate?
Depends how they man it and what kind of weather we have.
Weekend.
The summer.
You're managing it, it'll be a weekend.
The summer's a tough time. Many times they'll only roof from sun up until noon because of the heat on the roof. But they'll have to man the job. We'll certainly put a completion date in that will require them to man the job for it. The other thing we would do the bus garage after school. I mean, we wouldn't necessarily do that. We don't need to do that. We could be working there while school's in session.
Are these roofing manufacturers, Goodyear and Carlisle, still limiting their distribution to companies that they have trained and certified?
Approved applicators only. You must be an approved applicator. You must have all of your people schooled. It's quite a comprehensive program, and then, of course, you're graded. And fortunately for us, we have every building in rubber except the high school, and I think that's a tribute to the community and past boards. I mean, one of the things we find in so many buildings as you visit them on a rainy day, I mean, in other school districts, and there's just such a liability factor. Not only are you damaging your investment, but you always run the risk of slips and falls because of water coming in from a leaking roof. But we've had 10s, and that's the top rating. Most of our roofs have been a 10. The one roof that was not a 10, and that's the nice thing about Carlisle and Goodyear, was General Nash, and they came back at their expense and did a $96,000 repair on Nash. So our warranty has been a good warranty. It's Goodyear is now part of Carlisle. No one really knows what the full life of a Carlisle roof will be. They keep extending the warranty now and then because the oldest roof they have is at the Farm Show complex in Harrisburg. So they really don't, I mean, nobody's saying that it goes 35 or 40 years. We've been very pleased. It's all in the application and the supervision of the application.
Art, you say we won't have to do rip-off down, but if we ever put another roof on that building, we'd have to do a rip-off then, wouldn't we?
Not necessarily.
Oh, really? Okay.
With a single membrane rubber,
I thought you could just put 2 applications down and then you'd have to rip it off.
that's typically on a shingled roof on a residential site.
No, I'm talking a flat roof.
No,
Yeah.
you can rub a roof over.
Okay. How many years have we, yeah, right. How many years do you figure this roof will last? Ballpark.
With a 15-year warranty, I have to think we're in for minimally another 25 years.
Thank you.
Long after you're up.
We're out of here.
Long after.
We're out.
I'll be right there. One of these kids can be up here doing this in 25 years.
Art, to change the question a little bit, getting back to the construction, during this construction phase, just looking at what was done, what is still being done at Penndale, and looking at the number of trailers for the number of contractors to store their equipment, and we're running a high school during this period of time. Considering the size of this construction, we're talking about the number of contractors and the amount of equipment. Do you envision that we're going to lose a lot of that parking lot during this time? Are we going to have a problem in that area finding space for all of this stuff during that
Let me help
construction?
you understand why we have so many trailers here. We're 228,000 square feet at Penndale compared to whatever the square footage is going to be out there, let's say a half or less than a half. So that reduces the need for material. We did a lot of advanced purchasing here because we wanted things to be here. We have every window for the job in trailers. We have every door and door buck. We have all the marker boards. All the things you can't get when we need them this summer, we have on location. And furthermore, my bigger problem has been, Don, when I take 19 classrooms and give them to the contractor, I need to take 19 classrooms full of student desks and all that type of stuff and store it. So many of these trailers are ours. I mean, we're renting the trailers to store. I mean, you just have nowhere to go with student tablet on desks. So you have to take 3 and 4, and they're bulky. They don't store well. So that's what we have.
So what you're telling me is that you don't see a problem with the
We'll have less
construction
number of trailers, and we'll certainly have to have a staging area.
Okay. Let's move on to Dr. Bond.
Thank you.
Art, I'm sure we'll be back to you with other questions later.
A couple things I'd like to add to what Dr. Bowes and Art have said. First, I want to dispel any notion that there's a bond plan out there, because there isn't a bond plan. As I said once before, the bond plan is way past its time, and it can't happen now. And I would like, from my perspective, for everyone in this community and at this board to get behind the Bowes plan and see if what we can do to make that work for the young people that are going to be at North Bend High School. And I have to emphasize something a little differently, because I hear us talking about the year 1999. I'm concerned about the year 1996-97. Another concern that I have when you talk about utilization of the facility and taking a look at capacity, my concern is what's going to happen in the area of the gymnasiums and in the area of the arts departments. The space that we have at this high school now for the band, chorus, and what we would be doing if we had the same phys ed program is not accounted for in this plan. I just need you to understand that. The other thing that I want to draw your attention to is the need for additional fields. And that's a crucial piece, and that will have to happen at early on. And the other thing that I would like to mention, and on your documents it says something about halls. The problem that we're going to have that will be most significant prior to the completion of this addition will be getting from A to B in a reasonable amount of time. One of the first things that I would like us to take a look at is how we're going to make that happen. And as I said, on your sheet it talks about additional corridors. That to me is one of the most crucial things, because if we're going to have difficulties, that's where it's going to lie. For me, the major thing when you take a look at how many students a school can hold and what happens there, the major issue for me is safety. That's the major, number one priority for me as a principal is safety. And I'm here to tell you that I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about that from a facility standpoint, but I'm also concerned about that from a human resources standpoint. And that has to be played into the equation as well, and as early as September, in my opinion. So as you're looking at this, just know and acknowledge that once this addition is up, there's still a concern for space at that complex for the areas that I mentioned. I don't know that I can add much more because Art and Dr. Bose did it so well, but Juan Vaughn stands behind the Bose plans with a couple concerns, and I've mentioned those to you in the past couple minutes. So that's where I am. And in terms of numbers, we've agreed to the number, and I'm very comfortable with the number that we've agreed to in terms of capacity at the high school, but I also caution when you talk about capacity and you talk about this addition, what the addition is going to provide for us is another capacity situation. We're still going to be talking about capacity. We're not going to be talking about a lot of room to play with the numbers that we're addressing here. Because if you add 800 students and you're talking about having 3,400 students, you're still at capacity. There's not a lot of play. That concerns me. But I'm very much in favor of going ahead with this, and this addition, in my opinion, is the way to go with the concerns that I've addressed.
Thank you, Dr. Bond. I think what we need to do now is continue dialogue. There has to be more questions from board members. And after we try a round of dialogue, after questions, what I'm going to attempt to do is seek consensus to move forward with Dr. Bose's proposal. So, started on that side. How about some more questions from this side?
Are we that side or this side? I'm sorry.
You're that side.
Oh, we're that side? Okay. My turn?
Your turn.
Okay.
Sure, your turn, Bill.
In light of what Dr. Dr. Bond has just pointed out, was there any consideration given to his concerns when we went with the plan that we now have as far as additions and renovations?
You want to deal with that, or, I mean, together we can deal with it? We certainly have talked about trying to improve circulation as it relates to cars.
And we've talked about, with the services, Mr. Allen, of an architect, and some ideas that Dr. Bond and Mr. Wood have already discussed as having great potential for giving instant relief once they're installed and accessible, to considering that with the architect as a part of the overall plan. Again, I can't emphasize that this is not a plan, but it's an idea. The plans will come with the architects and engineers' work and the staff's ability to talk to them about what if, or what if we did that, or can we do this, or whatever. And from that, with the budget limit that you put on the project, we'll see what we can do, including all those things that Dr. Bond mentioned as legitimate concerns. I totally agree with his concerns.
Mr. Allen, we had talked, and Dr. Bond and I have reviewed this so many times, that if we could get youngsters from A pod to the back of H pod in a expeditious way, that would be great. Our problem is, if you're familiar with that area, we have that courtyard, and you still need to get emergency vehicles into the courtyard. And that's a problem, and we've talked about a covered canopy, we've talked about something that we even talked about, and as far-fetched as it sounds, a hydraulic roof section of the roof that hydraulically would raise to allow an emergency vehicle to go under it. But we've done a lot of brainstorming. We know that if we can get young people from A pod that are coming out of the cafeteria and coming out of D pod, if we can get them across to the back of the gymnasium or cooling tower area, if you will, it solves a lot of problems. We don't know that we have in-house a good solution. We have lots of ideas. It becomes complicated. We deliver all of our pool chemicals through that same courtyard and put them in the basement, all of our acid and our chlorine. So that's another problem, because we buy bulk. It comes in a polypropylene tank truck, and they have to get in there. So we need the expertise at this point of a designer or someone that probably and hopefully will have a better idea than us. If you looked at the original $31 million plan, we had a connecting link, but it was only, it was a second-story connecting link, allowing for the necessary clearance underneath. It's complicated, but I am sure in watching good architects and good planners plan, I am sure that somebody's going to have some help for our particular problem.
Thank you.
Okay, more questions?
Okay. I guess I'm just back to the fact that we designated as a PDE rated capacity of 800. When Dr. Vaughn, as I confirmed with him, when he assessed the functional capacity of the school that's there now, he took and found the gross number of the instructional spaces, and he made one deduction of 10% to come up with the 2,700, 2,750 that we've been using. That's correct, okay. And as we've done this, and you take your instructional spaces that are actually going to exist, whether they'll be fully utilized or not, it's in excess of 1,100. A 10%, as a matter of fact, it approaches in between the 1,100 to 1,200, and I'm not going to bother to assess how many students in the special ed classrooms or any of the resource rooms or any of those. I'm talking about the clearly defined and standard classrooms and labs that are in there. So in the process that was used to assign the PDE rated capacity, you take something that begins between 1,100 to 1,200 and it becomes an 800 student addition, which is about a 30% utilization discount. I just like to see us have a balance between some of those items that Dr. Vaughn has brought up in making sure that as we are building, we've appropriately addressed those other areas as best we can without expending a great deal of funds into core facilities that we really don't have a clear need for using. I would like this done with by making sure we also have the capability if the numbers should play out higher than anything that we've been seeing so far. You know, above the 3,400, 3,200 that we would expect. So that's my only concern, is that there's so many classrooms going in, and I think that perhaps a balance there in the space allocation between some of, say, perhaps the small audience, less classrooms, but making sure we've met some of the needs of the high school that's there, that exists.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Come on over. Donna?
Dr. Bond, back to some of the things that you addressed. You mentioned music, you mentioned phys ed. Theater, that area. Just thinking about something you had said maybe a few meetings back in regards to phys ed, I believe I understood you to say that our students at the high school take, I think the word quote was exceptional amount of phys ed, like above and beyond state requirements for phys ed. You're talking about indoor phys ed opportunities as opposed to phys ed classes outdoors.
I'm talking about an intramural program for those students who aren't going to have an opportunity because of one athletic team. I'm talking about a formal intramural program. That's what I'm talking about. In addition to that, we are currently taking, and we present more phys ed to our youngsters than the state requires. We don't present more than we think they should have.
Okay.
However, even if you disqualify that, the concern comes when school is out at 2/22 and all of the groups that need to use the facility that we currently have, and that's that one gym. And my major concern has to do with an intramural program for youngsters. And we don't have the place to do that. We just don't have a place to do that.
We have 13 elementaries with gymnasiums, fields, et al. How does that not work?
The research I've done on the issue of intramurals says very clearly that if youngsters have to go after school someplace else to do it, they don't participate. They don't participate. It's a transportation problem. And that's an option that we have. It's an option that we have, and if that's the way we have to go, we have to. But for me, it's an unrealistic expectation.
Okay, but the gymnasiums that we have currently on site do meet and or tend to exceed to meet state requirements for phys ed instruction as an academic course.
That is correct.
Okay, so your interests are in additional extracurricular
Yes.
to accommodate a large high school.
My
program studies are
my
coming up.
interest is having a formal intramural program for the students at the high school. That's what that's about. But the other issue relative to the arts is a totally different question. That's an academic question. That's an academic question because right now we don't have the space for the youngsters we currently have. I mentioned before that if you take a look at the chorus, for instance, next year I'm going to have to limit the number of students who are going to participate in chorus because we don't have space for them. We're going to have to limit that. We're going to have to limit a number of things because and drama, we just don't have the space. Our drama room is about as large as from that camera to the wall, and the auditorium is being used by band or orchestra. That area is just not serving us well. It's just not serving us well. We're incredibly limited there. That's the reality. The other reality is that with one auditorium, you have one place, one time, and it's so big, that sometimes we have to give it for a group of 100 people, and it's a shame that the youngsters don't have more of an opportunity to participate in the arts and the music area than they do because of space. And we're talking about adding significantly more students. I worry about the fact that we have over 200 youngsters in the choir now, and we're going to have to tell them that's all we can have.
Okay. The other question I had was in regards to, Dr. Bose, you have here the inclusion of cafeteria and kitchen in your proposed addition. My understanding was that there wasn't going to be a cafeteria kitchen, that we were going to upgrade, enlarge, enhance the existing.
That's a real possibility. I would suggest, again, with the services of an architect, we look at A and B. And we might bid one as an alternate, so we can see, in fact, what it would cost to do it two different ways and choose the better way, or the more economical way.
Relative to the kitchen and cafeteria, that's an area where we have a lot of flexibility because it's designed the way it is and it's so mammoth now. So there's a lot of options that an architect will be able to share with us relative to what to do with the cafe and kitchen. The kitchen is more of a concern at this point than the cafeteria.
And we really, in our discussions, we would prefer to keep that centralized where it is.
Right.
Add a nice new dining room facility, expand upon the existing kitchen. You then keep all of your dumpsters and all of your deliveries in the back of the house, and it just seems so much more functional to do it that way. And that's why we proposed in our most recent concept that would be off of the side of the existing cafeteria.
Okay.
I've visited places where, large high schools, and particularly have looked at the cafeteria and the kitchen. And I have no problem with adding to the cafeteria as it is and having it all in one place. I think it would be advantageous to do so, rather than have a separate one. Plus, it's cost effective.
Or you may have already addressed this, and if I'm repeating myself, just stop me. I was talking with Ken moments ago. But how much square footage do you currently utilize for purposes of warehousing that would be maybe picked up when, in the event that this board would choose to go with the 4-H and use that freestanding building for central warehousing as you suggested before?
We are very limited in the high school for any kind of storage or warehousing. If you recall, plant operations people build a warehouse at Penndale.
Right.
And we do our central warehousing there. That's a sizable warehouse, but it is strictly a warehouse, concrete floor, block wall, no windows,
Like
an
a barn.
overhead door.
Right.
But at the high school, we've always had a problem just storing Xerox paper and paper towels. I mean, we're limited over there. We could certainly move that kind of storage to the 4-H if we needed to.
That's a great question. One of the things we've had, as a matter of fact, as recently as this past year, I put the Xerox out and put the night crier in because we had to use the space for where the night choir was to put students in terms of classes. So that's one of the things that we have addressed in our plans is storage and warehousing, because
It's square footage.
oh, it's incredible.
It's viable square footage. Plus, there's, I would think, putting it all in one central location, you have control of inventory.
We have
Better than ever
control.
before.
We now have control, and food service has control, plant operations has control, but we would want to keep an adequate supply because you run into the cost of delivery and handling if you're not keeping paper towels and Xerox paper. We would want to keep an adequate supply in that building. It's not something that's easy to drop off 20 cases of Xerox paper on a given day. You know, if we can bring 50 or 100 cases into the building and work from that, it's much better.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. President, thank you.
Okay, more questions? Sharice?
Dr. Vaughn, I just want you to clarify something for me. When you were addressing Mrs. Mingle's concerns about the intramural program and the fact that the children who may be inclined to go out for intramural sports may not be so inclined if they didn't have the facilities right there on the site, had to be transported elsewhere for practice and whatever. Could you explain then the difference between an intramural system of providing athletics and our costs involved with our junior high programs, where we have a significant transportation cost being proposed here to transport those children off-site for practices? What is the difference?
The difference
in
is
your opinion?
Okay, notoriety. Notoriety, expense. They're wearing uniforms. It's an official interscholastic program, so that they get something out of that they don't get from intramurals. You have to remember that the youngsters, most of the youngsters who will be competing in intramurals are doing so because they didn't make the team that they really wanted to make. And there's so much, well, just all you have to do is pick up the Reporter or any local newspaper and you see what happens to most of those youngsters who are involved on interscholastic teams. Plus they get to go places. They get to travel on school buses to places they may not go otherwise. The difference between intramurals and interscholastic is a self-esteem piece. It's a I am somebody piece versus I am somebody who couldn't make the team piece. That coupled with the fact that when we're off-site, we have to negotiate for space. Right now, we're negotiating for space for the middle school folks off-site. And on some days, we can't get there. Some days they're just not going to be able to do it because other things are happening. And one of the things that happens with intramural, one of the reasons we use intramural is to get folks to think that they're okay and to get them involved with some kind of team situation and to get them into something that is constructive and meaningful for them. That's the difference as I see it. Now, but I need to say something else too, and it's important to understand that all of my comments are based on the principalship perspective. I'm not coming from necessarily from a financial perspective that Dr. Bose does that. I'm talking purely from a principalship, what I see, what I view, and my dealings with young people. So I need to say that because that's where I am.
And I guess my only concern really is the fact that I would like to see this project combined with the needed renovations that building now requires. Dr. Vaughn has done an adequate job of addressing some of the immediate concerns that he has. And I guess my question would be for Art, are some of those safety issues that Dr. Vaughn mentions tonight items that we have to wait on before beginning?
No,
with the hallways and things of that nature. I mean, aren't there things on this list, Art, that we can start prior to the construction of the addition?
You're talking about my list of needs at the high school?
Yes.
Sure, certainly. We had talked about that. If I You know, quite frankly, Mrs. Krieger, if I would get a green light to proceed with that process or with that list, we would probably begin doing some of that this summer if we had funding in place. I mean, we wouldn't get into the majors, but I certainly, next September, would want to do or plan to have, as I said earlier, the cooling tower underway. We would probably want to do some door replacements. We would want to do whatever we can do as far as upgrading in the area of ADA. We know we want to put automatic door openers in the front door at least, but that's something we would want to do this summer, so we would come up to speed with some of that. It's obvious when you look at the list, and I guess the one place that I erred is the last thing that we'll probably want to do is pave the parking lot, so that may not be $1997, but on the other hand, if we go in and get site work done early on, you know, the site work that's proposed, this may be the $265,000 under E could be duplicated with some dollars in the overall proposal that you see for new construction, because that will involve new curbing, new paving. But this summer would probably be a perfect time if we could get out to bid and get it underway. Our bus facility certainly needs to be repaved. And there are things, we would just bring them to you in a timely fashion as we have in the past. We're always doing something. We just did new, and board members will, from the past, will remember, we just did a total ventilation system in the chemistry labs at the high school. And that's been going on, and we just completed it. But that's something that's been a year in the happening until we got the design, went to bid, and got it. Now we're finished. I believe that everything is online. But there's always something happening. I'd like to address the pool heater right up front. And the reason I'd like to do that is we're currently heating with electric. And I think we're going to have a sensational payback by going to gas. But that takes some serious engineering, because where we heat our water is below grade. We have to talk about a chimney, or do we go a ventless unit? And so they're the kind of things that wouldn't disappoint me. When we're on with our boilers, we're heating by taking hot water from the boiler, putting it through a heat exchanger. So next winter, we only use our electric pool heater in the non-heating season. Next winter would be a prime time to put the new pool heater in. So we would certainly want to move on as many of these as we can.
Let me tell you what I need immediately: hallways and health suite.
What was the first one?
Hallways and health suite.
Because the hallways are addressed within your project, isn't that correct, Dr. Bose? Or would be?
We would want it to be a part of the total project. And we don't see these as two separate projects. To the extent that we can do them together, we think we'll save money and also save time.
I mean, I've talked with Dr. Bond about the possibility, if we have an architect online, and that architect's studio is big enough to produce the kind of work that has to be produced, there's no reason why we couldn't go to bid to move the health suite. And there's no reason why, that doesn't necessarily have to be part of the overall project, although initially I would want it to be done, the design to be done by the same architect, so that we have good continuity in architecture. But we have an idea where we think we ought to put that, and it's outside of the existing footprint, so there's no reason why that could not be underway even if we had kids in school.
So that issue is important enough that we make the sacrifices we need to make during school time to get that done. Because right now, I guess I don't need to remind you that our health suite is on the second floor, and it is very tiny, and that scares me. So I'd say health suite and hallways are my two most significant concerns for immediacy.
Couldn't the hallways, I don't know if we're doing much about the hallways, but couldn't block scheduling, or the thing we've talked about in the past, general, having longer classes and having the dismissals at different times alleviate a lot of the traffic in the hallways?
What it means is that you don't move as often, but once you move, you still have the same problem.
Well, no, couldn't you have them staggered?
I don't know how you do that. The block scheduling, I don't know block scheduling that has staggered times. I'd have to look at that. I'd have to look at that more closely.
I thought because the classes were a longer period, I mean, if they started half hour later or.
But the students that leave that class still have to go to the next one. You know what I mean? So
And
what they do is they pass less frequently, but they pass at the same time. That's the problem, that they're passing at the same time at some point. But we're considering that, even if with the hallways, we're considering that. And at some point, we're going to take a very serious look at block scheduling for the reason you mentioned.
Okay, more questions? Sharice?
I guess my only other question would pertain to the possibility of us taking a look at class size and how any changes to the guidelines that we've discussed thus far, how that would impact the need for an 800 student addition. You know, I don't know. I'm just concerned, you know, that if that's, we've talked about taking a look at the classroom guidelines since we appear to be out of compliance with the current ones at the secondary level now, and if we adjust those, it's brought up for discussion in the event that this board may revise those guidelines. Would that have any impact on the need for an 800 student addition?
Fair question. Do you want to try to address that, Dr. Bond? Give us an update on our class size guidelines in the high school?
If what I need is some direction in terms of what you mean by raising class, I can give you some projections relative to capacity. The capacity, as I expressed it here, has to do with the class size guidelines that are currently in effect. If you're asking me to take a look at some other guidelines, I'd have to have a ballpark figure because I'm not sure what numbers I'd be addressing. Do you want me to go up by 2, 3, or just what would?
Okay, all right.
Well,
We need to
you
hold
understand
that
what I'm
question.
saying?
All right,
This is my concern.
we may need to come back to your question. What I'm going to try to do tonight is to try to seek consensus to see if
Right.
there's a majority that wants to move forward with the proposal. If there's not if there's not a majority, if there's not consensus to get it onto the agenda, we'll come back and revisit and address these questions.
Well, okay, maybe I should be a little bit more specific. Maybe what we could do is try to achieve consensus based on Dr. Bowe's plan, but also for the board to bring about a direct discussion on the guidelines that we now have in place. Since we have found a discrepancy in those guidelines, which are from 1990, and maybe what we need to seek consensus on is having an A and B plan. A being Dr. Bowe's for 800 students, and a B plan being a plan that, based on any changes in the guidelines, may warrant a smaller addition. It's just some, I want to proceed, but I want to make sure that what we are constructing is what we absolutely need.
May I ask a question? When you say there was a discrepancy in 1999 class size guidelines?
1990.
I'm not sure when you say what was the
Well,
discrepancy?
this goes back to the January meetings when I visited the middle schools and found quite a few of the classes that had more students in them than the guidelines defined. And I'm assuming that that very well may be the case currently at the high school.
I tell you what I have. I can tell you. I can tell you exactly how many students are in every class, every period at North Bend High School. I have that. I keep
I'm
that
sure you
information.
do.
I keep that information, so I would be able to show you exactly what you're asking, as for now,
Right.
and as it relates to the current guidelines.
But what you said was that the capacity which has been projected
Right.
at our facility now is based on the current guidelines, which are
Right.
from 1990.
Right.
So my concern is, are we, if we're over capacity or over the guidelines at the junior high level, then I would assume that we are in some areas over the guidelines in some of our classes out at the high school. If that is the case, does it impact the need for an 800 student addition? So
Okay.
I guess what I'm asking is for more clarification.
I understand the question.
Based on how the need for an 800 student facility has been projected.
Okay, I understand the question, and I can get you that.
Okay, thank you.
Can I say something about the guidelines? The guidelines are that, they're guidelines, and there's sufficient room within those guidelines to accommodate overages and allow the board some options in terms of how they deal with those overages. So that you know, you can do some things that you want within the framework of those guidelines. The other thing I'd say, though, that is probably a meet and discuss item that would surely need to be discussed with the union.
Talk about that.
More questions? David?
I have two concerns, excuse me, two concerns as we move from concept to design, and they relate to some of the concerns that Dr. Vaughn has, and Bill also had the same types of concerns. If we do have space problems with band rooms, chorus rooms, arts facilities, phys ed, and those are not accounted for. As we move to the design phase, how are we going to make those decisions to specify to an architect, find solutions to that, don't find solutions to that? And also, the second part of my concern relates to the fact that should we come to an agreement of what the design is going to be, we have an approval, according to a tentative schedule right now, an approval for PlanCon that would be in October of 1996, which is how far removed from the delivery of the strategic plan. And with many of the action items that many of these teams are going to bring forward and consolidation of all those action items into a strategic plan, how are we going to make the decision? How are we going to incorporate those requests? How are we going to incorporate that plan into the high school into the addition that we're trying to find an approval for today? There are only concerns, again, and it concerns the design as we move from proof of concept, but they're there. For me, they're very real. I would like to address the safety issue, traffic flow, hallways. I would like it to be specified to the architect that we're going to do those things, that we are going to address the fact that we are short of space for other activities, both academic and extracurricular. I'm not quite sure how that occurs even as we vote today, or not vote today, but try to gain a consensus today for what we're about to do. So if there's any enlightenment anybody can give me on that, I'd appreciate it. Other than that, we just might have to play this one by ear.
Anybody want to comment?
I understand what you're projecting as an ambiguous condition for which you would want assurances and answers. And I think the best answer I can give you, and it will certainly be subject to Art's additional response, would be that is where you really need the services of an architect to determine how you get from point A to point Z, transcending and traversing everything in between. And you do it in an orderly fashion. Now, you have to look at, I think Penndale is a marvelous example of good planning. We conducted a full school year there for a large student body, all freshmen. At the same time, we closed down part of the building, we housed them in another part of the building, and then when the new part was done, we moved them and then went into the old. In other words, it can be done. And it can be done with that kind of detailed planning, and that's what architects are good at doing, and subject to our identifying all the issues we want to address, such as hallways, such as proper storage space.
I can appreciate that completely, but some of what the architect will bring to us will depend on what we specify to the architect. For example, if we recognize the fact that we are going to try to plan to bring, to incorporate 800 more students into the high school facility, one of the things that I could envision we do with an architect is say to the architect, you now have free rein to look at any reasonable space that may be utilized in a different way, to say this space can be moved. For example, if in the addition, what if it's decided that all of the administrative offices in the high school could be moved to the ground floor of the addition, putting classrooms in there? Is there a minimal impact into that? Does the architect have the free rein to look at issues like that? To say that the computer labs can be better utilized as classrooms. Let's put a whole floor of computer labs in an addition. Will they have those kinds of freedom to look at the best utilization of space to give us the facilities that we need? And that goes beyond what we have today at a conceptual stage.
Well, I would hope so. I would hope that in authorizing the employment of an architect and generating what the board would suggest would be an appropriate budget, that the architect and the staff would be free to think about alternate ways to accomplish the same thing. You earlier asked a question about adequate electricity in the current facility. Well, suppose we foresee in our look at the future that we need considerably more technology than we now house at North Penn High School. And the architect says, well, the best place to do that is in the new wing, the new pod, the standalone addition, whatever we call it, because we can design that from the very beginning and not disrupt anything that now operates and put all those greater electrical needs in that new facility. The first floor might be full of technology.
I mean, again, I understand that.
I don't think
the issue again is for me right now. If we do achieve a consensus to find housing for 800 more students, and understanding, I mean, there were good reasons and bad reasons for putting an addition, as we had previously got a concept from our architects that said this doesn't work because we have no place to move students as we rip out a wing. So many of these things might be points that we'll never get a chance to look at just because it's not going to be feasible with the population. But my point is, how are we going to give our instructions to the architect, and what kind of instructions are we going to give them to be able to make the best use of the space we have, to give us the best design? In other words, it's easy to say that this is the building, and except for a cafeteria, it's going to look like a school, and this is the right space. What I'm looking for is the assurance that the architect's going to have the ability to look at all of that space and try to give us something innovative that will meet some of the concerns that Dr. Bond has, the concerns that the rest of us have about traffic and hallway safety. And I'm not sure how that's going to happen after we approve the concept that we will have a single high school at a single site, and we are now adding additional housing for 800 students. That is my only issue.
Well, I understand, Mr. Weiss. I think you understand that what we're saying is we don't understand and can't describe to you how that might happen either, but I believe together we can develop the parameters that would enable it to be a possibility.
That's the only assurance I'm looking for.
The parameters might be essentially, you fix the price tag, and the price tag is based upon our estimate of how many additional students we want to accommodate, and then we say to the architect and the staff, all right, now let's think together what needs to be done and what we can do within the parameters that the board has set to make North Penn High School the kind of high school that it ought to be within those limits, and without thinking with any restrictions other than the parameters themselves.
That's the assurance I'm essentially looking for.
And I think that'll be a part of your charge whenever you make this decision, if you're going to make it.
I think, Dr. Bose, just to expand on that a bit, fortunately in this community, and I had the pleasure as a department chairperson to be involved in the planning of the existing high school in 1968, but this community has always driven its buildings by allowing its staff to be involved. And I think the perfect example of that is most people that visit Bridle Path, Walton Farm, and Gwinnett Square would agree that that's as near perfect as you can get in elementary school, and I think that's a real compliment to our administrators, our teachers, our staff, our custodians, our secretaries that really get involved in the planning. And I think we're finding the same thing to be true at Penndale. I mean, the input, if anything, it's one of the reasons that the design drug out a little bit longer than it should have. And that was because we just had so much input. But I think, we need to rely on the professionals. We really need to rely on the staff. We need to rely on a very seasoned building principal and his staff to give us what we need. And maybe in the final analysis, we'll be looking at an Audion or something that will deal with drama as an alternate bid. And maybe if we get lucky in the bidding market and bring some numbers in, you may agree that you can afford to address part of that fine arts problem that exists at the auditorium.
So who put the health suite on the second floor?
Who put the health suite on the second floor?
Which staff member thought that one up?
I
Is he
wasn't
still on
involved in the
payroll?
health suite. I didn't. The television studio.
There's a guy before him.
Mrs. Clark is in charge of that area.
He isn't here anymore.
I was a baby.
The guy that designed it isn't here anymore.
Okay, we have a lot more to do tonight. Pat?
My first question to you is to you, Mr. President. What are we just talking about going ahead on an 800 student addition, or just going ahead with the concept tonight?
Well, I certainly would think that we would be going ahead with giving Dr. Bose, Art, and Dr. Bond the green light to go ahead for planning of an 800 student addition. Not necessarily a concept. Take the concept to the next step where we'll be even authorizing them to begin work with an architect. And I would think it's safe to say that the costs that we receive from Art are from the firm of Breslin. And I think we should talk about that a little bit tonight. But I am going to try to seek consensus tonight to give them, or to get something to appear on the agenda for next week, authorizing them to work with Breslin and within guidelines of a cost that we have to. I'll throw a number. We had a number of $15,122,000 plus 2.6. It comes up to about $17,770,000. If you combine the two, what Art has brought forth. Okay, so what I'll be holding the board tonight to authorize for the architect to move forward in conjunction with the administrators that I named.
All right, so we're talking about going forward with an 800 student addition then?
Right now, that's what we're talking about.
Okay, because I had asked Mr. Wood, and he was very kind enough to get me some figures. We have, I think, over in the neighborhood of 500 students coming into the district next year, in kindergarten, I believe it is. And I just, and this is no reflection on you, Dr. Vaughn, honestly.
I will not take it as
I've never asked anyone before, so don't take it personally, but it was my understanding that the present high school was built to hold 3,400 students. And now we're talking about 2,700 being capacity.
Mr. Mosey, that I've heard that number several times.
Well, I got the 2,700 from you because that's what you said you felt capacity was last month when we discussed
I don't know
it.
where the 3,400 came from, but we do not have in North Penn High School the capacity to seat 3,400 students. It just flat out does not exist. Okay. We have 3,000 instructional seats at North Penn High School.
Right. Okay.
I don't know where. I don't know. That may have been. I don't know where that came from.
Okay.
Well, hold on. I saved my sheet from last year on high school options. And it says we have a total of 126 total instructional spaces with an average class of 25 students. Comes up to 3,150. We have 10 instructional spaces for special ed, average class 15 students, 150. We have 116 instructional spaces for non-special education students, which brings it down to 3,000. and then you take the 90% expected scheduled usage, which gives your functional capacity at 2,700. So that's how it's backed down to 2,700.
I had a question for you, Mr. Wood. I noticed on land acquisition, for the 800 student capacity, we have 400,000. For 500 student capacity, we have 400,000. For 600 student capacity, we have 570,000.
That's a mistake. Should be 4.
How realistic do you think that figure is? I've talked to some real estate people, and they tell me that might be high.
Without showing her hand, I would say it's high.
Thank you.
You could just shake their hand.
That's why I don't pray.
Dr. Vaughn, also, you mentioned even with the 800 student addition, you still have concerns. You're saying it still might not be enough to do what you would like to see done up there?
Well, no, what I'm saying is that with the 800, we're going to continue to be at capacity.
Okay.
But I'm arguing for 800, Mr. Mosey.
Okay.
I'm not arguing for more than that.
Well, I'm just concerned because I see that we're talking, $2 to $3 million difference between 5, 6, and 800, which is a sizable millage increase. We also talked about, I'd like to ask you, isn't VOTEC and Tech Prep going to have some kind of an influence on the capacity or functional use? We're not going to have kids there all day. They're going to be in those programs, are we?
The VOTEC school and Tech Prep are separate entities. Separate entities completely. They're not going to be at our place all day, but there are times during the day where we could have all of the students, depending on what happens at the Technical Career Center. We could never guarantee that 50% of our students will be at the Tech Center at the same time. We can never guarantee that we won't have all of our students in the school during a portion of our day, particularly if we're taking a look at block scheduling, that kind of thing. Right now, during the first period of our day, because of the timing of the Technical Career Center in our place, our students are all at North Bend High School. They start over there at 8 o'clock and we start at 7:20 or 7:30. So our first period, we have all of the students there. And another reason for that is the number of credits that these youngsters have to take. So it could be first and second period. My concern would be that if we build a facility thinking that half of our students will not be there, or half of the Vocational Technical Career Center students will not be there at a time, we could find that something happens over there that causes that not to be the case, and we're stuck.
I understand that, but what I'm saying is I was in a meeting last year when Mrs. Mengel brought up the concerns when they were still talking about the second high school concept. And she brought up the concerns she had about logistics and scheduling, and now Mr. Hill has brought it up again tonight. And I seem to think that if we're going to go ahead and build an 800 student addition, and then you're saying we're still going to be at capacity, and even with the incorporation of VOTEC and Tech Prep expanding, because I'm on VOTEC, I know that it's going to expand.
Right.
I think we have, aside from the population problem, I think we still have a logistics and scheduling problem.
Oh, I do too.
And I think this has to be addressed.
Oh, I know.
We're talking about having problems moving from kids A to B. And in conjunction with that, I know that we will do a utilization study. And I would like to recommend, because there are people who do this for a living, I would like to recommend along with this that we do interview and we do bring in a building utilization consultant. And my reason for recommending that is, and this is no reflection on you, Dr. Vaughn, I know you're there all day, but if we're talking about moving hallways and we're talking about, even with the addition of an 800 capacity, 800 student addition, we better do this thing right the first time, and let's look about what hallways have to be moved and what classes perhaps should be better utilized, and let's make sure that when we start this construction and we start making modifications, let's do it right. We not only owe it to the students, but we owe it to the taxpayers of this community. They're going to be paying the bill, and I would hate like heck to have to revisit this thing in another 2 or 3 years and come back and say, we're short classroom space again or whatever. I don't think it's ever been done. I know that education is changing because perhaps what we built 20 years ago, because of special ed requirements and certain things today, we don't have the flexibility we had. But I would like to see us bring forward, I understand it doesn't cost that much in relationship to what we're going to spend, but I think that it's something that we should seriously consider, because as Mr. Weiss just asked Dr. Bose some questions about the ongoing process and so forth, I think a lot of this could be eliminated with the building utilization study. And if I'm not mistaken, I think we have to do something of that sort before we submit Plan Con to the state, don't we, in order to get reimbursement?
We do a feasibility study of the entire district, which we have well at hand now, and then we do a educational spec, which in the past has been done by the director of secondary.
If we were to bring in a building utilization consultant and he made his recommendations, would that present a problem to the Plan Con?
How much would we pay to do that, Mr. Mosey?
I have
How
looked
long
into it,
would
it'd
it
be
take?
somewhere in the neighborhood of $10,000 to have a consultant do that. There are consulting firms that do that.
And how long would it take?
I don't know. I'm just bringing it up as a suggestion, because I just think that if we're going to do this, and already we're saying that apparently the building had some flaws when it was designed 20 years ago, or the flaws have come to the fore today. Plus, Dr. Vaughn is saying now, even with the 800 student addition, we may still have some problems. I think that, let's do it right. I think we owe it to the students and the taxpayers of this community to research that. That's one board member's opinion. I don't know how much support I have for that, but that's what I would like to do.
You have the principal's support.
Thank you, sir.
If I could add in,
I am
Pat.
finished. Go ahead.
Mr. President, I too would support the utilization of, or the hiring or the taking on of a consultant to do the utilization facilities work, not to slow down the process. I would like to see it happen at the same time. I'd also like to see that 800 number talked about more tonight, and an agreement on not only the concept, but on the number. But I feel that there's a net effect on that building that has changed over the many years that we've been here. And I think Dr. Bond has done the best he can in terms of stewardship and utilization of a building that he's inherited. But with the inheritance of the building, when you came to work here at North Penn, you inherited everybody else's plans, ideas, programs, studies, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think if a utilization consultant came in, we would get the net effect of traffic patterns and the changing of traffic as we anticipate these hallways, the net effect of program of studies that have changed over the years on the number of rooms that we have. I just saw the other night when we were under extreme pressure to be creative, that Art and Judy came through with accommodating a special ed situation with those special walls to take one room and now make it two to fit perfectly a population that you both identified. A utilization man would do that, and we would need him. He could not do it in and of himself. He would need Bond. He needs Wood. He needs the people that have been here. But it's an academic study in itself. We've had consultants in here before. I'm not fond of consultants. They tend to come in and tell you what you already know. But this is a situation where we'd have to have real answers. And I think the traffic, program of studies, class size, as Mrs. Krieger mentioned, all those issues have a net effect on a building that has now grown to be 25, 28 years old. So it shouldn't slow anything down, though. It could be done while we move along.
Might I suggest that if you're going to do that, you really need to do that next Thursday night, to appoint that person. And let me tell you why. If we miss the opportunity of April and May to have youngsters in that building and have that person there while you have youngsters traversing the building under normal programs.
That's
and
correct.
We all know that June is not necessarily a normal program. If you miss that window, you're going to be into October or September or October until you see it again. So I think it's really necessary to move on that.
Well, as you gentlemen mentioned, that guy for Thursday night, I don't have that guy's card. I'm looking at you and anticipating that you know the field the way you do, and that you might know a guy. Breslin might know a guy, or 3 or 4 guys that would look into it. Department of Ed, there's The guy's out there. I don't have him.
So it's time. David, one more comment.
Just have to make the point that
We are well over an hour and a half into this, and it's time to move forward, and I'm going to attempt to move forward. I'll allow one more comment from David.
I was just going to say, I will certainly agree to hire a consultant for utilization if the board's fully prepared to accept the findings of the consultant. If it turns out you need a 900 building or a 1,000 building, it goes in both directions. I mean, other than that, it's an academic exercise, and I'm not interested in an academic exercise because we have people here that have made their best estimates. And if we're going to hire a consultant, it has to go both ways. And I'll accept both decisions, if it's smaller or if it's larger. But I think everybody needs to be prepared to do that.
That's fair.
Okay,
That's fair.
we talked about this enough. I've certainly had the opportunity to talk to board members before the meeting. We've been discussing this off and on individually. I think I'm going to attempt to bring forward something. I think I've basically taken the pulse of the board. As board president, I have to try tonight to seek consensus that we can move this thing forward. I think we've talked about it enough. I think it's time to move on. I don't support a consultant. Later tonight, we will talk about buses, and we will be talking about consulting firms we've used with our buses. And I'm not a big consultant fan. I never have been. Been very open about that I'm not big on consultants. So I won't support that, but we'll see where we will go with that. So, in saying that, I'd like to revisit just two numbers one more time. What I'd like to do, I'd like to work with the 800 number, but also like to work with the 600 number. The 800 number brought us, with the repairs that Art wanted to make, somewhere $17,772,000. Agree with that, Art? Is that about where we are?
That's about where it is.
So basically, we're talking 17.5 to 18 million if we want to do the repairs and do an 800 addition. Now, if we do 600, how much lower is it?
Well, you have before you
Right.
an estimate, and if you take out...
I don't, or maybe I didn't get it.
If you take, yeah, you have it.
It's about $1.6 million, Tom.
Exactly.
Actually,
The
take
difference
out
between
the
600 and
50,000.
800 is about $1,600,000.
Is that taking out the 50,000 overreach
Oh,
for...
okay, there it is.
I just took the bottoms of the sheets here.
Nickel and dime-ish.
And for what it's worth, I multiplied it by 7%. I divided it by 20 years and came out with a yearly cost of about, if you round up, $86,000 a year over 20 years. For perspective.
Okay.
Just the bill.
It's
So
just the difference
we're
between
not going to
600
have, we're not going to have a lot of conversation. I'm going to attempt to control this part of the meeting.
Good luck.
Okay, I'm going to round up. Okay, I'm going to round up. On the 800 edition, I'm going to round it up to 18 million. And on the 600, help me out with the number. What will it be?
About 13.5.
Roughly 1.5 less.
About
So we're talking
13.5.
18 versus 16.5, right?
Where'd you get that?
I got that. I just heard Don Hill say about $1.5 million less.
You look at your sheet at the bottom of what 800 is.
13.5 versus 15.1.
That's the difference. The difference is $1.6 million.
So bear with me for a minute. Just bear with all of us.
Because you're adding repairs in.
It's not
It's not
even
even fair.
the 26, the 2,650,000, you have to add that to both of them.
Right.
4, 6, 7, 11, 16. Right, it's very close to 16 million versus, it's closer to $2 million difference. It's 16 versus 18, okay? Now, where am I? Gotta think for a minute. We have to talk about the architect. Well, no, we're not going to talk about, I'm just going to mention about the architect. I'm going to take the liberty to assume that there's a possibility we could move forward with not having to get into major discussion about RFP for architects. I talked with Art about this a little bit before the meeting. Currently, Mr. Breslin, with his data that he has supplied, I think he has a figure of 6%. Okay? Do you feel that Mr. Breslin would negotiate that fee at all?
know, so, I mean.
That's definitely a cap, though. 6%'s the highest that he would charge.
I have to believe since he used that number. Typically with renovations and additions, you're running anywhere from 7 to 8%. He put that number in there, so that's a starting point at 6. Now, we're, you know, with the permission of the board, because of the success that we've had with Biro, we would want to use Biro for mechanical.
Right. Okay, that's 6%. Let's stick with 6%, and perhaps you could negotiate to get him at a lower. We don't know that, but we know that 6% is the cap. Lost my train of thought. The next question is how to frame this, because I'm trying to think how to frame it to get consensus to move forward. I'm going to assume that this board would move forward with a cap to this architect, taking into consideration what David has mentioned, what other board members have mentioned, that we would certainly want the architect to look at different ways to present an addition. But I'm one board member that would certainly want a number in the back of my mind that we would not exceed the number that has been brought forward. In saying that, and you got to bear with me, because I'm going to try to make this as simple as possible and wrap this up in the next 5 minutes. Dr. Bose's plan calls for an 800 student addition at an approximate cost of $18 million. There has been a suggestion for a 600 student addition at a cost of $16 million. Now I remember the question I needed to ask Art. With either addition, whether we do 600 or 800, the drawing that Breslin supplied to us showed a shaded area. Would either one of those additions be easily expanded to, if necessary?
It's certainly a
And let's not talk about a number, but certainly Mr. Breslin took liberty to shade an area that it would be a logical place to keep growing if we ever had to. I don't want to get into a number debate on that. I just want to put to rest that 20 years down the road, certainly it could be expanded upon again if need be.
Conceptually, it is, and this is a concept again, but that pod or addition allows for an open-ended expansion.
Okay. Now, so let's give this a try. Is there consensus on this board to authorize well, I don't know how we'll frame the motion for Thursday night, but basically, and we have to work on that, the motion would be something to the effect of to authorize the administration to move forward with Breslin the architect to construct an 800 student addition and take care of all the existing recommendations that Art has within the existing high school at a cost not to exceed $18 million. Does that make sense to anybody? It's a hell of a motion.
Well,
Question.
are you asking for?
Question.
Question is, if in fact, within that $18 million, you can do some of the other things that we talked about, would that be allowed? That doesn't actually show on Dr.
No, it
Bo's
doesn't.
plan.
It doesn't show. Sure, it would be allowed.
That was exactly my question.
Okay.
How do we do some of these things?
That is part of the authorizing the team to move forward. They come back to us in a month or two, this is where we are. We rediscuss it, but we know that they're on track, and that we know that they are not going to exceed $18 million. That's how I would understand it. Okay? Okay. Are there, and that also, as part of that vote would be framed that we would not bring a space consultant in. It's basically as Dr. Bose's plan is presented, with adding on that the architect would have the liberty to work with Dr. Bond, Art, and others as necessary to be creative in where we get our best, for lack of better words, bang for our buck.
Tommy, I have a comment to that motion as you've got it worded there. We talk about the different millions of dollars and different 600, 800. It would be my suggestion that be worded to say that we're authorizing to proceed with the addition of the school at the $18 million figure with the goal of maybe having 800 students, but if it turns out as they go with this and the other concepts and they can only accommodate 600 students, they're going to have to go to bigger class sizes, they're going to have to do other things, but not necessarily hold them to both 800 and 18 million.
Right.
I would rather hold them to 18 million and make that, than make the students fit within that, in that number.
Okay.
That may mean bigger class sizes, that may mean other accommodations. But I feel if you say 800 and 18 million, I can hear, and you go into contract decide, I can always know you're going to have change orders. We're going to find something, we're going to find rock, or we're going to find something's going to happen, there's going to be change orders on this job. It's just, it's a fact of life in construction, even with a good contract manager.
I'd like to, I haven't gotten too much into this, but I'd like to agree in that, as I look through it, I'd like to see if we move forward with the architect and the phraseology of this, is not to actually have such a strong commitment on the number of so-called instructional spaces, whether we're going to talk Pennsylvania number, Department of Ed numbers, or whether we're going to talk functional capacity, or whether we're going to talk gross. Because as we go through and there's opportunity to evaluate the priorities, the educational priorities that drive the dollars that are going into that building, it may bring some of us together if you recognize that I don't believe that if we don't need 800 instructional or 1,100 instructional spaces in the building, that we might be better placed with providing the audience through those dollars, rather than having classrooms sitting there that aren't necessarily needed. And this would give as they all get together and go forward with the architect, and when there's a set parameter set like that, that's when everyone starts to sit down and rethink, well, this is what we have to work with. Where's the best place to balance this project through, get the job done, serve the students' needs to the fullest degree without overplacement. So that makes me more comfortable, because I've just got these papers of what was given to us from Pat, and as I look through, that has a gross capacity student instructional spaces of over 850. You know, it gets dragged down through whatever math that they use on this thing, but we may be finding some initiatives taken.
We can frame it with looser terms. I just,
Great.
I'm open for that. I'm ready to attempt to move, to get this board to move forward.
Well, Tom, I would agree with that. We go with the dollar amount, as Don Hill had just said, the 18 million, that we agree to move ahead with an addition that allows for a zipper end, as Art just described, which will allow, whether it's 600 with a zipper or 800 with a zipper, it shouldn't be governed by bodies as much as it is affordability and program of studies. And I still feel that we should give use of that consultant in this package to work with the architect. Bond supports that he would work with that person. And
stop right there, though. Who would we give the authority to go out and find that consultant?
Would.
Okay, we would. Okay.
Would. And Bose, of course.
But this person would work directly with the architect.
And Bond.
And
Wood. And Bose.
And the staff.
Right.
Well, would have to
be involved in the interview process at all?
That doesn't make sense, so.
I don't know how I would interview.
That would be time, yeah.
Well, my only concern with that is that Pat's given us a round figure of 10,000. What happens if we go out and a figure comes back for a building utilization of our high school to be 15,000, 17,000? You know, I mean, I don't know. I personally would like to, you know, join with Don in what he said with the dollar figure, and have Mr. Breslin work with that. I mean, we don't even know, you know, what these firms run yet. Our staff hasn't even called around to find out, you know, where these companies are, or the Department of Ed. You know, maybe the Department of Ed would provide something to us at little or no dollars. What a concept. You know, I just, I'd like to put a not to exceed figure on that, if we're going to put not to exceed figures. I'm not comfortable with just saying, walking away thinking it's only going to cost us, or it's going to cost us $10,000, and then come back next week and find out a bigger surprise.
I believe the Department of Ed does have
Contract.
all sorts of services that are provided like that. They had, as a matter of fact, one of the school districts we went to, they actually sent someone in to help design the whole school that they
We
built.
shouldn't hold up anything.
Well, I mean, that's what I'm
Let-
saying. I mean, I would like to
We could
have
try
our
the-
staff come back next Thursday.
Art, do you
Art,
think
come
there
back
is
in.
someone out there who you would be comfortable with?
My first conversation tomorrow morning would be with Mr. Breslin.
Right.
I mean, here's a man that's working all over the United States, has done more secondary ed facilities than most studios. And if somebody's gonna know a good consultant, Bob Breslin only uses good consultants. I mean, he's just, he's just a no-nonsense person, and if you're mediocre, you don't work for Bob Breslin.
So you could bring back something, more information for us by next Thursday.
I would assume that.
Doesn't have to hold up the rest
I
of
mean,
this.
I can talk to Brad Fury at the Department of Ed,
That's all right.
and see what
Do both.
Brad has to say, but, they're
Get the
always a little
information,
bit
do both.
hesitant.
Well,
I mean, they'll give you
yeah.
a list, but
We
they're
can-
hesitant to recommend.
But is this a contradiction, though? Is this a contradiction to say that we're going to do that and cap the dollar figure? Because if you do that and cap the dollar figure, and he comes back or she comes back and says something different, what are we going to do with the dollar figure?
Oh, that comes back to David's question.
Do you know what I mean? If we get the consultant and they come back and say, this Bond guy was much too conservative, and that,
What happens if he comes back and he says you don't have to build anything?
well, then we don't build.
Okay.
That was
can't put
really
like-
my point. I mean, if you're going to have somebody to do this, if he says a lower figure, we're gonna sit
Right.
there and say the consultant is an expert in their field and we need less space. But if he says more, we have to be prepared to
But that-
accept that conclusion also.
That caps tonight. We got plan cons in October. This board meets how many times a month? If there was something that was absolutely.
8 times a month.
8 times a month, 10 times a month. If there's something absolutely out of the ordinary, and this board should, prudently look at it again, and the commitment we made here tonight, that it was a fair gesture and analysis, that if a consultant comes back that we hired, and we were wrong, then,
Well,
you step up to the plate and address it.
We just gotta
I'll
move
still
forward.
be vocal that I don't support the consultant, but to move this forward, I'll do what I have to do to move it forward.
You already know that.
Okay? And if we're saying that we're gonna leave it in the hands of Art, Ron, and Bud to work to get that consultant, I will go along with it to move this project forward.
Why don't we have Art just,
Make
she's
the
gonna call Mr. Breslin tomorrow. I'm not in favor of holding up the project either. We have to do something.
You gotta move forward.
We ran in November on that ticket and it hasn't changed. We know we have to do something up there. I'm just saying that, let Art speak with Mr. Breslin, see what individuals he recommends and get a feel what kind of track record they have. We could even, between now and then, even perhaps, if we get a name, even call
That's
some
true.
of the
We can
board
call
members at that school district and find out if they felt they got a fair shake from that consultant. And if not so, then I'm willing to withdraw my suggestion. I don't want it to cost any more than.
Okay, so how do we move?
Tom,
What
may I
should?
speak?
Go ahead, I'm sorry, Bill, go ahead.
Well, never mind. Don said I can't. And he's older.
Okay.
Well, you got that right.
I'm listening, I'm sitting here listening, and I'm thinking back. I've been up here for 2 years plus. I sat out there for 2 years as we discussed all the way back to the task force, PEL, how many times, principals, three superintendents came through here, and all of a sudden, we're gonna make a decision based on one guy we don't even know yet. We have shot down every expert, so-called expert. We've shot down architects, a year-long task force study, input from people that have been in this school district for 20 years, a man that's been at the high school for 9, and now everybody here is going to make a commitment based on one guy out in Never Never Land. This amazes me.
Friend of the architect.
It's time to think. Think for yourselves. Make a decision. The time is now. If you want experts, they're sitting here. They're in those schools every day. There's people in here. Nobody knows this high school like Dr. Bourne. Nobody knows our buildings like Art Wood. We have Breslin. We can call Dick Warmcastle. We have people that know these buildings, that know this district, and give a darn about this district, that are right here. And you're ready to make a decision that if this man says it's 900 people, boom, that's where we're going? This is crazy. I'm listening to these people that I've been listening to for the last 4 and 5 years. I don't want some consultant in here for $10,000 to make a decision. And the other thing I'm listening to, we're building this because students are coming to this high school. But then we're saying, well, when we hit that magic budget number, we're going to make them fit no matter what. We're letting, we think we're in an $18 million range. Well, what if it's 18.5 or 19 to get the right number of kids in? Are we going to say tough luck? And that's what I'm hearing. We're saying cap it at 18, and if it comes in for more kids, we make them fit. Because based on one guy that we don't even know. I don't know what to do here, Tom. You're asking for consensus. My gosh.
Now, especially from the crowd, we're letting our emotions run away with us.
I'm sorry.
And we need to
my
deal,
honor.
okay? And
Yeah.
okay, and business does this all the time, Bill. All the time. People come in with what they think they need, and the board of directors say, okay, this is what you're going to get. And this board is going to do business different than the past board.
That's fine. I'm just
Okay?
saying my opinion, Tom.
You're entitled to your opinion. And now we've spent 2 hours on this. It's time to draw to close. It's time to get something on the agenda for Thursday night. I'm going to try it again.
Sorry, I regret you're gonna have to change your tape.
Well,
Let's get it done in a minute.
How many minutes do we have? 3 now? 3 minutes.
You can't do it in 3. You want to do it in 3?
You'll cut it in the middle.
well, we're going to take a break and we're going to come back. We're not going to discuss it. We're going to bring it to close. To attempt to frame what emotion might look like for next Thursday night. And Don is.
Well, go ahead. I'll make it up as I go along.
I think it's time to conclude the discussion and move on. So, Don, I'll turn it over to you to make an attempt at what this motion might sound like that would appear on the agenda for Thursday night. And then we'll seek consensus to move forward.
This is really rough. I just trying to scribble something down here on a piece of paper based upon the inputs that I've heard from the other board members to reach some kind of a general agreement. And what I have put down here on a piece of paper, roughly, if I can even read my own writing, is the motion would read something is to direct the administration to hire the architectural firm of Breslin to start the design work to build an addition and make the necessary modifications to the North Penn High School at an estimated cost of $18 million. The goal being to have this addition and modifications to house an additional 800 students. The administration will also determine, after discussions with the architect, that the possible need for a consultant to help in the utilization of the existing building. That last sentence I'm kind of shaky on, but that's about what it is.
That's kind of, okay, well, but one thing, I think though we'll ask Ken to reframe it, and I think part of the reframing is that we're not gonna be dead set to 800. We're gonna, there's gonna be flexibility in there.
I said the goal.
The goal, exactly
We're
right.
not going to be dead set on a consultant, it's just a possibility.
Right.
And
And
that's
again,
why
we're not voting
we don't
tonight.
need the
We're
student
not-
number.
Ken, do you feel you have enough
I
information?
believe I have a sense of the discussion, yes.
Okay, and you would get that out to us by Friday, so we all
Yes.
have a good chance to look at it?
Yes.
Okay. Is everybody okay with that?
I have a point that, and I'll say this calmly. Can you go to an architect without stating the number of students that you want to fit?
I said the goal being.
Yeah, but
Sure.
I think that's part of the negotiation.
they have to have some kind of a beginning point.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's like building a house. You want 3 bedrooms or
Yeah.
5? I mean, they need to know exactly, not exactly, but they need to know that we need to accommodate whether it's 600 or 800 students.
So the 800 number will be presented to him.
But,
We're not,
you know.
correct?
That's what I'm
It
saying.
will
Yeah,
be
okay.
presented.
Okay.
But one of the things you have to understand is he's working for you folks. And everything that comes back, I mean, it's this board that will direct him to go where he's
Yeah,
going.
but he has to have a starting point.
Right. You need to
Okay,
have a
and that's what we're giving him.
Art, am I
Okay.
correct that these papers that have it already classroom, proposed classroom scheduled for 500, 600, and the 800, they were all done by Breslin, were they not?
And it's just
No,
following
it
this.
was all a part of this, and these cost estimates, just to be clear that there's no misunderstanding, we didn't pull these 12.3 million numbers out of the air.
No, we didn't.
And we didn't pull the 13.5 for the other, or the 15 million for the 800. These were numbers that were done by an estimation that came from the architect, and there is a built-in margin for other costs.
And I need to tell you,
In what we're talking
he
about.
spent considerable time, when you see municipal water and electric service and all of that, I mean, he spent time with Frank Brown in discussion on the site. I mean, these numbers, he's not gonna give us
It may not be to
bad
the penny
estimates.
right now,
I mean,
but
he
it's.
spent
Okay.
time putting them
Uh,
together.
Well, no, I talked to some board members out in the hallway. I know there are board members who aren't comfortable with 800. I know there are board members who think it should be 800. I know there are board members that think it should be 600. So it's gonna be a long night, but we may have to keep talking about it.
Well,
I don't
think-
wanna come back 2 months from now and
Well, that's
say,
why when I wrote
wait a
this-
second here, we're only gonna do 600, doggone it. I mean,
No,
let's,
Tommy, what I think is that when you set the amount of 18 million, and then you let our educational professionals work to see what their educational priorities and scheduling needs to be to service the incoming student body. And this way, Dr. Bond and Dr. Bose and Art and the architect have some flexibility in being able to designate whether they want to shoot for classrooms that accommodate actually 1,100, but will probably only be holding 4 or 5 or 6. Or whether they want the audience to offset, an audience perhaps would be a better value to the whole educational program of the district rather than having excess classrooms there.
well,
And
so
that's
are
why
you okay with how it's framed?
I don't see the students' need number being in there, but and then we can place that in with the goal of accommodating approximately 800 students.
Okay, John, are you
I'm
okay with
comfortable.
that?
Yes, I am.
Bill, are you okay with that?
Yes, first I'd like to say something.
Okay,
And I
and
know it's
that's
out of
very
order.
understandable.
I'd like to thank everybody for participating in my weekly therapy session.
Did it help?
It's a lot cheaper, believe me. And I thank you all. And I apologize to my board members who took that personally. But yes, I do support this. Thank you.
Okay, let's keep moving around. Donna?
Bill, I did take that personally, and I thank you for the apology. Thank you. I'm impressed, and I appreciate that. Yes, I'm fine with it, and that 800 is, is a goal, not to exceed 800. Even if it read 600-800, I'd be even more comfortable.
I considered that.
Did you?
600.
600-800.
There you go.
Okay, 600. Well, now I need to come back. Is everyone
All right.
on this side okay with it, 600 to 800?
That's
Fine.
the goal, approximately.
Well,
It's a goal.
no, and I'll say this, because if we have a building that we are led to believe, and if we agree, that can only accommodate 600, I don't think that's a sufficient number. So I wouldn't support a 600 student addition if it was limited to 600. So I would have to say, if we're gonna put that as an acceptable floor, then I will not approve.
Okay,
Well, go
back
on.
to Vicky. Do you
Yes.
support it
Yes,
saying
that's
600 to 800?
That's fine.
John,
Fine with me.
Don, do you support it?
Either way.
You'll be our
Okay.
educator's driver.
Donna supports it that way.
Yes.
Sharice, do you support it that way?
I support that way, but I have a problem with the last sentence that he read about the
consultant.
Can you read it again,
Ken's
John?
reframing
About
it.
the
I didn't
consult-
write that one, and I made it up as I went.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I'll turn to my
Just you made
secretary
it up.
and read what I said.
Wait, Ken, go ahead, Ken.
Could I just expand on it then?
Yeah, Ken,
Ken's
like to
I
clarify
think
because-
what he said was that the administrators would decide among themselves about who to call in for a utilization, or whether, for them to decide whether or
Determine if
not.
it's necessary.
If a utilization review were necessary.
Authorize them to,
Okay.
so, how's that?
I have a problem with that. I believe that this board needs to make the best decision in regards to this expansion. If this board believes, on top of the expertise that we have from our administrators, that we would like the extra insurance from a utilization review person to be for us to designate the administrators to obtain a list of those companies through the Department of Ed and from the list that was given to us in public testimony by Charles Bailey last month, when he got up and was very specific about the companies that he had researched that do utilization review. And then let us decide next week if in fact we want to proceed with that, because I think it's ultimately our job to do that. If we want to make sure that 600 to 800 is going to meet our needs, just like David said.
I think you're, let me interrupt just for a minute, just so you understand what my motion was and where I'm coming from on this. The first half of the motion that we read about is 18 million for 800 or 600 to 800 students. I think that stands alone. And I don't want to change that, and I think
No,
that has to be a
right.
direction.
Right.
The only other, when we get into the consultant thing is that we build the building and that we still have the old high school is there. I mean, the existing high school is there. Old is not the right word. But the existing building is there. And we want to utilize that building as it exists with the addition to its best, in its best way. That may mean moving something or changing something or modifying something.
Okay.
That does not mean having a consultant come in and say, you're going to have 900 students or
Right.
1,000 students or something.
Right.
I just wanted, the only reason I said to agree about a consultant or even
Okay.
consider a consultant is to utilize the
What we
building
decide to
as it
build.
exists in its best manner, where that means moving this to that or changing this to there at a
Okay, so
nominal
that comes
cost or
after.
whatever. I'm not, I wouldn't even think that the cost for that would still would be within this $18 million package. Now, that's how I saw it as a consultant, that's why I'm saying is that if we're directing an architect to build the building for $18 million to house 600 to 800 students, and if if the administration and its expertise working with the architect determines they can better utilize the building and they need outside support to do that, then let's get it. If they think they don't need the outside help to do that, then why spend the money?
Well, my only reason for asking is because Dr. Bond has told us that with an 800 student expansion, we're gonna be at capacity. So, if
Well,
that's the case, then.
We're at capacity if we don't increase class size, we're out capacity if we don't do some other thing.
Depends how you
Well,
define
it depends what
capacity.
comes in.
I don't want to
We
get into
talked
that.
about
There's two
elementary
capacities.
last
Right,
month. It
right.
depends how you want to define capacity.
Okay, fine, I'll go with it.
David?
It won't surprise you that I still believe that we need to build a building for 800 students. Dr. Bose brought this concept to us in a memo. I cannot believe that he brought us an arbitrary number. I have to believe that he consulted with the rest of his staff to come up with that number. And these are the people that we rely on to make sure that we have the facilities that we need to educate the students. I would like to see the proposal target 800 students. I would like to see the proposal target $18 million, allowing the flexibility that we may need to best utilize all of our facilities to accommodate the increased enrollment. So I can't support something that talks about 600 students when our administration has given us a concept plan that asks for a building to accommodate 800 students.
Okay, Pat?
I agree with the 6 to 800 concept.
Well, it sounds like there's consensus at least to move forward with a vote that would be framed something to what Mr. Hill brought up. We need to move on. Ken, do you feel comfortable in how you will frame the vote? Or I'm sorry, how you will frame the motion?
I wish I could do the latter.
Big time.
I understand the most firm thing is the 18 million.
Right.
Can we associate the word target with that, or
Yeah,
goal?
oh, absolutely.
Rather than just,
Absolutely, and then, Bill, I mean,
it's not
I
a cap.
apologize, I snapped back at you
well,
a
that's
little
the way
bit.
it appeared.
You know, cap, I should, maybe I shouldn't have said cap, I should have said a target of 18 million.
Probably gonna cost 20.
Thank you, Tom.
It's down from 30.
I'll be bringing you,
I'll let not to exceed, then they.
with your
Okay.
approval, I'll be bringing you two separate motions.
Okay.
There'll be a separate motion for a consultant and a separate motion for 18 million target and 800 student target.
6
6
to
to
800.
800, 6-800.
6 to 800.
Okay. I understand.
Better make that note.
Six consensus for 6.
You
I
don't
have
have to
that-
make
I have
that
that
note,
note,
because
but-
I don't know that we're gonna get on Thursday night, I don't know that we'll get a full 9-0 for that, with it being framed with the 6 to 800. But
Then-
it's
You gotta
time to
get it
move
on the
on.
agenda.
That provides the greatest opportunity
Right,
there.
right.
It's not as staunch
Right,
as,
that's how it needs to be framed.
Restrict-
There's consensus, it's time to move on.
6 to 800.
Yes,
You don't have
Target.
9 for 800, so.
right,
Right.
okay?
Okay.
Okay, any more, does anybody think we need to discuss this anymore at this time?
No.
No.
No, let's move on. Thank you, and we need to move on. Okay, next item on the agenda. North Montco expansion.
oh, it is the first one.
I'll turn that over to our liaisons to the North Montco.
You gonna withdraw from North Montco?
Yeah,
Donna,
They can save 2 million.
Bill,
we gotta fill these rooms.
The only thing I can say, Tom, and I don't know if Donna or Tommy had any, or Bill and Don had anything to add to it. You see the figure on the back, what they're talking about, 6.2 million. Our market share, they based it on students attending the school, is approximately 39%. So the cost to the district is gonna be 2.43, almost 2.5 million.
Right.
And they've given us flexibility in terms that they're allowing school districts to come up with their own means of financing this via a bond or cash. I know there's one school district that is going to just write them a check. I'm not sure which one that was.
I think there's
That
two.
was back
Was
there.
that
Dennis,
Park
we
Valley?
have
Park Valley, what's the
2.5, we
check,
can write him a
Dennis?
check.
Yeah.
What? Oh,
Don't
yeah.
bother to cover it.
I think it would be nice to do that.
I think our liaison should
We're
write a
also
check.
paying the most.
It's
our fault.
But
Put it on the agenda.
we have, you saw
Okay,
Mr.
yeah.
Dr. Irwin's presentation, you've gotten binders on it. That I think, I went there for their retreat on a Saturday, Bill was there. They really have their act together, and they're doing this as economically, and it's gonna be a very serviceable building when they're finished.
You've sold us.
Okay, is there
So
consensus?
we have to decide how
Is
we're
there
gonna finance
consensus
it.
for that to appear on the agenda for Thursday night?
Yes.
Yes.
What is it that we'll be giving though, Tom? The funding or just the vote?
I would say at this
To
point, we're
support,
just giving
just
them
to
the support that they
Okay.
can keep continuing their planning, that
Right.
we will then come forward at a
Okay.
later date
Right.
with,
A
and come
resolution of
forth to the
support.
community, how we
Okay.
will fund it.
Mr. Crumbs, if I could
Send
just
them an
add,
IOU.
is this something that Dennis would be prepared to present to us come budget time as options for us to come up with the funding?
Yes, sir.
Hopefully, I'll be presenting it to you. I'm meeting it there on Friday morning with the other business managers, and I'll present the options right after that to you,
Okay,
hopefully
thank
before
you.
next Thursday's meeting.
Okay.
Fine.
One more thing. Dr. Irwin did say that although he needed a vote as soon as possible to progress, the money doesn't have to be forthcoming within the next 30 or 60
Right.
days. They just need our vote so they can start putting the wheels in motion and architect and things like that, so.
But I think it's important to add that
Yes, right.
if we vote for the concept, we're assuming responsibility to accept that we pay the money.
Right.
Correct.
I mean,
Yes.
yes, it is,
Yes.
it has to be by the Articles of Agreement.
Yes.
It does have to be two separate votes, and they count the votes differently. And
But-
they
but
need,
at
they need
this-
different
right.
majorities, but we can't say, yeah, go ahead and do it, and then back out on the money. So you
Right.
understand you're
We
committing
are
to the money.
committing to it, but we do not
We're
have to
not
commit to
decide-
them this time whether
No.
we're gonna write them a
No.
one-time check,
No, we don't have
whether
to
we're gonna
commit
go
that
for a
way.
bond, how we're gonna do it.
Okay.
We need that,
Yeah,
our discussion will continue in the very near future on
Yeah.
how we will fund it.
And one thing, and I only bring this up because I've been asked this. Our market, our payment is based on our assessed value, not our population. It's our percentage of assessed value of all the districts. So that,
Thank you.
that we are not being, quote, penalized by higher payments because we have the most students there.
Right.
And if you know your numbers, our percentage of cost of this school is actually less than our percentage of children that attend the school.
Right.
So somebody's helping us pay for this one.
Now, there's no chance of this being affected by reassessment, is there, Dennis?
No, not at all. This
There'd
is,
be no alteration. They just used it as their designate,
that's
their
correct.
formula, their internal formula?
That's a state formula.
Oh, state.
These are state guidelines that they do that under.
But once it's been given to you, that stays secure and that's
Yes.
not vulnerable to change? Okay.
In fact, one thing I wanted to do is look at the costs, because after being around Art for so long, I want to make sure they have contingencies in there so that these figures are what the district will pay.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
One comment, we do meet Monday night, Pat, Bill, and I, and at that time, we will report that there is only consensus at this time to place this matter on our agenda for Thursday. We cannot commit you to a vote until you've taken it. So we meet on Monday, we'll talk of this consensus that we're all witnessing tonight, with the anticipation that there'll be a vote on Thursday, and then the results of that Friday morning, Board Secretary can inform Michael Irwin that it's in fact happened. Thank you.
Any other discussion on this topic? Okay, moving on. Back to the agenda here. Okay, finally, turn it over to Fred.
In order to recognize the lateness of the hour and certainly the urgency to move along quickly, I'd recommend that we buy 5 vans and 5 buses and multiple questions.
Be done.
What color?
Yellow? Actually, I want to preface everything by saying that as I did in the green sheet, I take very seriously the responsibility of cost when I'm recommending any kind of consideration for buying new buses, because they are expensive. However, having said that, I need you to understand that when I do come to you, it's with a sense of urgency that we do in fact need the new buses. I've asked John Cotran to be with me tonight in case there are some questions that I can't help you with. We are asking to purchase 5 new vans. The vans that we're asking to purchase would be replacement vans for 5 buses that we currently have. We have 5 19-passenger buses that we feel have met the end of the line, that they're not going to be serviceable to us for any longer. These buses are 84s. They're about 12 years old. They average, well, the bus with the lowest mileage has 160,000 miles. The one with the most has 168,000 miles. These buses are built in essence, on van chassis with a body that looks like a bus. They do become, I guess just because of the design of them, they do wear out. It's not like the bigger buses that you can get 12, 13, 14 years out of. What we're asking to do, though, is rather than buy the new 19-passenger buses as we've had, we'd like to purchase vans. The vans would be about 9 passengers plus the driver. The 19 passengers that we've been using for special ed runs, and in many cases we're not transporting 19 youngsters. In in many cases, we're transporting 5, 6, 7 youngsters. From a perspective of better utilization of the equipment, it makes a lot more sense to think in terms of a smaller piece of equipment. Obviously, with the smaller piece of equipment comes a less cost. We're estimating without the benefit of a bid, though, that there'll be somewhere around $25,000. We would also suggest to you that there are some other advantages to that. With the regular buses, we have to employ drivers who are CDL certified, commercial driver's license, and that has a cost to us in order to get these people certified, roughly about $800. It's our opinion. When I say our opinion, I need you to understand that John is the one that has done all the legwork on it. It's our opinion, though, that with the smaller vans, we do not need CDL people to drive those vans. Therefore, we can save some money in terms of the training cost. Along with that, we're also convinced that perhaps we can do a little bit better in terms of actual pay for driving those smaller buses. The 19 passenger buses we've replaced on a every 8-year or 120,000 mile basis in the past. Tom mentioned a couple minutes ago, or an hour or two ago, whatever it was, that we did have a consultant come in and take a look at the transportation department, and that was Griffith Associates. At that time, they recommended some changes in terms of the criteria that we had always used, and in effect, it was somewhat more liberal. They are saying, they are recommending that we get rid of the buses every 9 years without regard to mileage. And what I'm saying to you is that the ones that we're talking about are 12 years old and have 160,000 plus on them. We also need to buy 5 other new buses. The new buses that we're talking about are 84 passenger buses. An estimate on the cost of those buses would probably be about $55,000 per bus. We need these buses simply because the additional youngsters that we have and because of the realignment with the middle schools. So that what I'm recommending to you is twofold, and we'd like this on the agenda for next Thursday night. I had hoped that we could have it on in February. We knew that if we got it on in February that we would be able to have the buses on hand by the beginning of the school year. It is suspect now in terms of the time of whether or not we can actually do it. It's my impression from the conversations that I've had with the vendor that it's still possible, but the time is very near in terms of being able to not have it. So what I would like to have done, of course, is to have on the agenda for Thursday night the ability to go out to bid for 5 vans and also for 5 84 passenger buses. You have to answer whatever questions you have.
Okay, let's open it up for questions. Let's start on this side this time. Pat?
Fred, 84, the vans you're looking to purchase, you're looking to purchase them or lease purchase?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I did mention that, forgot to mention it now. I think the board has to be open in terms of what they look at for financing. For some time now, Pat, all the buses that have been bought through a bond issue. And I think I had mentioned here at least one other time, I never quite understood the concept of buying a 10-year bus on a 20-year bond issue. You really have 3 choices, I guess, in terms of doing that again, or paying cash for it, or going to a lease. And the leases don't seem too unreasonable at this point in time. But I need to warn you that 1 year of a 5-year lease, buses during lease for 5 years, isn't too significant. And I say that very guardedly. I don't mean to underestimate the cost of doing that. But we are going to need a lot more buses over the next few years, so that no matter how you do it, whether you do bond issues, whether you do cash, or whether you do the lease, it's going to start to build up, because over the next 7 years, I guess, John, we're talking about replacing the most, very, very significant, perhaps most of the buses that we have on the fleet right now.
What will happen to the buses that we're getting rid of?
We have one bus that, one of the 19 passenger buses that we're going to keep here. We have a need for the equipment and all you see here with the TV and for Bob Gilmer to transport a lot of this different stuff around. So that's the bus, I guess, that has like 168,000 miles. We would keep that bus. The others, we would go to auction or put them up for sale or whatever.
I asked that question because didn't we buy a van last year for that reason, to move equipment and stuff around the district?
That was in our department.
Right.
A closed van.
Right.
For material handling. And it really would.
And only your department uses that, nobody else?
It's used 8 hours a day, 5 days a week.
Okay, because the problem I have is I know there's been a history in this school district where we have sold buses and other school districts have bought them and they're still running. And I know it's nice to say that, you know, maybe they're 12 years old and have 160,000 miles. Are these diesel or gasoline?
Diesel.
They're diesel. I was connected with the automobile business, and I know that you can run a diesel an awful long time if you service it properly, and I understand we have a very good maintenance department in this school district. And the diesel engine will run forever. I mean, I just question whether we have to replace it at this time, that's all.
Let me respond to what you said a minute ago there, because that obviously could be a very accurate statement. I don't know that. I was not associated with the Transportation Department in the past. I think that our past history would indicate that we bought the biggest buses, we bought the best buses, we turned them over more quickly. Our PMs were done on a 2,000-mile basis, and we spent a lot of money on transportation. I tried to preface the remarks by saying, I will come to you with a request based on the information that I received from John Cotran, that it's my feeling and my responsibility to tell you that this is about as far as we can go with these buses. Now, you have a choice to make, and that's entirely up to you. You can buy some new buses, or you can say, use those buses again. The only thing I would tell you that I am serious in terms of my responsibility, and I would not want to then be held responsible later on if in fact something happened with those buses.
Well, are we replacing the buses because they're just falling apart, they need new engines, or, I mean, is it just, it's just a practice we have in this district that every 8 years we replace buses when they, or every 12 years we replace buses when they reach 160,000 miles?
Well,
that's what I'm asking.
Fred, if I may?
Yes.
This particular issue is not about replacement. This is about additional buses needed to meet the increased enrollments.
It's both.
I thought it was
Well,
replacements
but
here.
there are 5 vans here, and that is an issue of, instead of the 19-passenger buses that we're using now, it's more efficient to have 5 vans. But the large buses are additional buses. This is not an issue about our replacement process on our fleet. That will come to us as the years come by, but right now, 5 additional large buses to meet enrollment. We're talking about replacing the larger vans in place of more efficient smaller vans, because I can attest to the fact that these 19-passenger vans are riding around with many fewer students than 19 passengers, because my daughter rides on one of them. So I know that's a fact. So there is an issue that we can talk about many times after our we've had consultants in to talk about when it's time to replace, when the life of a bus is over, what the resale value may be or trade-in value. Tonight we're talking about additional buses to meet enrollment, and the vans are another. I guess we can take issue with the replacement of the large vans versus smaller, more efficient vans.
And Pat, to try and answer further your question in terms of are we just turning them in because it seems time to turn them in, the answer is no to that. I did elaborate in the green sheet that at this point in time last year when I took over transportation, the board had already approved the purchase of 5 buses. And I asked John to get back and look at that when John came back with us last year. And on the basis of his investigation, even though the board had approved the purchase of 5 buses, said, no, we really don't need 5 buses. We did not buy any buses at all last year. I'm also saying to you that I am not concerned over any criteria that is in use right now or had been in use in terms of miles or in terms of timing. These buses here should have been turned in at the end of 8 years or 120,000 miles. We're now 12 years and 168,000 miles. What I'm concerned about is that if John can't tell me that we can safely and adequately operate those buses, or that to replace a lot of the different stuff on the bus is going to cost more than it's worth, and we're going to be in a position where we're going to have to continue to work with refinancing a lot of different parts on that bus, then I'm going to tell you, you need to buy new buses. My main concern is whether or not we can safely operate those buses.
Well, I appreciate what you're saying, and I appreciate your remarks, David, but again, I was in the automobile business and I know a little bit about them, okay? First of all, the vans that you're going to purchase and replace the 19-passenger bus, is that a gasoline or diesel?
It'll be like a spec of diesel.
It'll be diesel?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We don't have
Because you would
gas
never
anymore.
get this service out of a gasoline.
We don't have
engine.
gas anymore on the property, so we don't have
Okay,
gas.
all right. And the $25,000 figure, knowing the industry as I do, and you're going to purchase 5 vehicles, you can beat the heck out of that price. Because they had a rough winter, and they're very imaginative, and they're very creative right now. And they're sitting on a lot of inventory, and they play what they call floor plan, which means they're paying the bank for every vehicle they have sitting on their lot until they sell it. So we could be a little more imaginative there in terms of this $25,000 figure. And in answer to your question, David, it was talking about replacement as well as purchasing, not just strictly replacement. So I was asking in both cases. That's all the questions I have.
Okay, David?
Made my comments, and I support the recommendation.
Sharice?
Okay, I'm reading from the February 2nd, 1996 green sheet. I'm sure that everybody else is on the same page as I am. And I know, Fred, that you've been trying to get this on our agenda to have it discussed. Is this the need for these 5 more 84-passenger buses due to increased enrollments or due to the realignment of the middle schools?
Yes.
Which
It's
one?
actually,
Excuse me?
it's actually both reasons.
Okay, yet another example, folks, of another piecemeal is being brought forward to us because of the realignment of the junior highs. And this is exactly what I was talking about. And Dr. Bose, I would like to know, by next week, please, how many more different items are going to be brought before this board that are directly going to require us to expend more money because of the realignment of these 3 schools? I'm exasperated at this point. You're talking about another $275,000 for 5 more buses, for the 84-passenger buses, and another $125,000. I'm all for safety, and I'm all for efficiency. But once again, I asked for a complete financial impact on the realignment of these 3 schools. We were not afforded that, and here's yet another example of a piecemeal expenditure. And I would hope that these bids would be brought forward to us, Fred,
If you give us permission to do it, yes, absolutely.
before they would be awarded.
You will have to vote on the awarding of the bids.
Thank you. That's all I want to say.
Okay, John, help me with vans. Can you buy a bigger van than a 9-passenger with driver, plus driver? Are they big?
Start getting into different class licenses, and we're right back into the school bus license. I look at quite a bigger one, maybe 10, 11, or 12, but
I mean, I think about 9. I, like David, have a child that gets picked up in a very, very humongous van with a whole bunch of little, with a few little tiny kids in them. And I know exactly what he's talking about. And when I look at a 9-passenger van, I mean, that's not...
Could we buy a smaller van than that?
No, a larger one. Can you buy a van larger than 9?
Probably up to 12, sure.
Okay. And the reason you're picking 9 is to avoid a CDL license?
That's one aspect of it. With fewer than, anything below a 19-passenger school bus allows us to take a traditional license.
Okay.
One aspect of it is it's significant in terms of training and cost.
So there is no great customization needed to go from 9 to 12?
No.
Availability in a van?
No.
Okay, so I wouldn't support 9 passenger. I would want to see a 12 passenger in light of how many times you could use a van of that nature. And I think, the CDL license isn't like getting a med degree. I mean, that's not tough. I mean, it shouldn't be something to work around.
Alan, I lost you there. You're supporting 12, not 9?
No. He's asking for a 9-passenger van is the request here.
Yeah.
I believe for probably close to the same amount of money, you can get a 12-passenger van.
Okay, that's what you're asking for, 12 passengers.
Yeah, as opposed to 9.
Yeah.
You can get 12 plus a driver,
I need to
correct?
explore it. I just know that currently the standard in surrounding districts, and 1 or 2 that I rely on, are using a particular 9-passenger that's very good. That's why we used it.
Okay.
But we, in fact, have a 12-passenger over there, so we can explore that for you if you want.
Okay, and are any of these vans handicapped equipped? I know I see that we have special
These won't
vehicles
be.
for
No,
specialized.
none of these will be for physically handicapped children.
Okay, so that's not a request in here at all. We're fine with that. Okay, I guess some of the concern that was expressed by Mr. Mosey, I have heard about firsthand from local, I think I've already shared it with both you gentlemen, local police officers in the area that are mindful of our fleet and our personnel. And they think it's absolutely amazing that we have great buses, great maintenance, and then the buses are turned around and sold to another school district that puts them on the road immediately. Hatboro, Horsham being the one specifically relayed to me as a situation in question. And I guess I don't quite understand why is it good enough for Hatboro, Horsham, but not good enough for North Penn?
I think I can explain. That was a one-time deal to downsize the fleet with Ryder and Hatboro, when they bid on the best ones that we put up for sale, the big ones. We sold some pretty good buses. We had no use for them. Hatboro didn't bid on any of our 19s. Nobody would bid on them. We'd like to send them to Columbia.
But this just happened like two years ago?
It happened when we went to the Ryder contract.
When we went to Ryder,
but-
we had an
yeah,
opportunity.
but-
Well, we need to downsize.
Yeah, excuse me, and I know you weren't here, Mr. Cotran, at the time that occurred, am I correct?
I was
When-
doing
when-
buses initially for
When they were sold? Were you not aware of the switch going towards the 7, 8, 9 grade configuration?
Red camp plan.
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
2 years ago, was it 2 years ago or 3 years ago?
Red camp plan.
No, the Red Camp plan was
It was-
9th over there and 7th and 8th
There was going to be a configuration
at the
change.
2 middle schools, but
We're in
eventually the
We're in the
plan.
second year of a 3-year contract with Ryder, so this is the second year we've had Ryder.
Right.
So it was the end of what?
Okay, well then that's.
Well, there's a little misinformation, if I may. The 5 buses that we need, really 3 of them are strictly enrollment increases, just to transport kids.
Okay, it's driven by
I think
enrollment.
the point that Mrs. Krieger's made in 1994, the summer of '94, we sold buses. Now we're here a couple years later asking for 5. We could have just sat on those buses for a year or 2.
That's not fair, because the board looked at it that time and said, if we sell those big buses, that will help us offset the cost of a contract that we're about to sign. The board made the decision then, based on that moment. They didn't say, well, we'll hang on to 5 buses because we might have an enrollment increase. It was a dollar and cents issue then, as it is a dollar and cents issue
I
now.
believe I questioned that at the time, and at the same time, I recommended
once
that we
again,
put
it
more
was a-
miles on our buses than we do,
That's
that our fleet runs well over 1 million miles per vehicle, okay? And at the time, I don't know. you
That's
can
still a
check to
separate
see if I-
issue from
okay.
deciding to sell buses by another
Well-
board that had a majority vote to sell buses.
Okay, you're
How do you,
right. That's-
how do you
okay.
continually go
Absolutely.
back 2 years
Right.
ago and say, 2 years ago, the board should not have made a monetary decision, but should have looked, I mean, yes, you can say they should have done that, but how do you look at the request today and say that a board 2 years ago made a mistake?
Because, David, the board
What
2
good does it
years
do?
ago
What
knew
good
that
does
we
it
were gonna go to a
do
7,
to look
8,
at
9
a decision
We
made
can't
2
go
years
back to
ago?
this.
Right, right.
We
It
can't go
doesn't
back
do
to
any
Egypt.
good.
It won't
You're
work
right.
tonight.
You're right.
It won't work tonight. Okay,
No,
bring it,
you'll have to excuse my frustration with it, because the lack of planning is just mind-boggling to me. And I'm getting very frustrated as a board member now with having to come back and piecemeal monetary decisions that are going to impact the education of the kids. You'll just have to really excuse me. So, I mean, that's all well and fine, but
I think,
let's go.
I think we're with Donna.
That's okay,
Yes,
that's
you
okay.
are.
This is a tough night on everybody, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Anyway, bringing up Ryder is a segue to my next question, in that with the increased enrollments, are you anticipating more bus drivers, more staff coming on for next year?
Yes,
Okay, how many?
hopefully only 5.
And they won't jeopardize the current working arrangements of the employees we have now, correct? Okay. Have you considered?
Deregulated the new buses.
Okay, so have you considered Ryder being given another piece in light of this? In light of the need for more buses, in light of the need for more employees, it isn't going to disrupt the current employees that we have. Has Ryder been considered to pick up another piece, be it special
Ryder
ed, be it
yes.
kindergarten, be it something?
John and I met with a representative from Ryder probably a month ago, and that was part of the conversation that we had. And we are awaiting some kind of a proposal from him in terms of what that would mean.
But doesn't that proposal mean something to this decision tonight?
This request tonight is a request to put this out on bid, so that at some point in time soon, we're going to know how much it will cost if in fact the district decides to buy these buses. This is not asking to buy the buses tonight. It's a request to put it on the agenda Thursday night so that we can put it out for bids. And then we can tell you whether it's going to be $25,000 for the vans or less, or whether it's going to be $55,000 for the buses or less.
Okay, so if both you gentlemen receive 9 votes tonight to put it on there because we're going to get bids, you understand that doesn't mean there's 9 votes to make the purchase, right?
Fully understand that.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Don?
Yeah, a couple of things. One of them is and I don't want to belabor the issue about how many miles they should be on the bus before they're replaced or not replaced. And I believe, I think we've all maintained that we maintain our buses quite well, and we should get the long mileage on them. And before he came before us, another thing, and I have to rely on the transportation department to tell me when it's replaced. But don't tell me when you come to me to tell them replaced, it's because it's not feasible to fix them anymore, or there's a safety problem. That's right.
Don, let me say something, and I don't want this to come across as sarcastic or anything else, but I need to say it. I've sat here tonight and listened to a board talk about hiring a consultant to make a decision based on what that consultant thought, and many of the board members here would buy that in terms of a 600 or an 800 student building. $18 million. The district paid to have a consultant make recommendations for transportation. We are beyond the recommendations of that consultant. Now, I'm not sure, if we're not willing to listen to a consultant that we've paid for, which I'm not, and I've said that, and that's why we didn't buy new buses last year. That's why we're beyond what we should be with these. But what is it that I can do other than tell you that it's our best guess that at this point in time, these buses need to be replaced?
I didn't ask you for anything different than that. You keep being very defensive. All I'm saying is that if you're coming, whatever the consultant says, and that's fine and good, and that's a guideline. But I'm counting on our transportation department to make their best estimate when a bus has to be replaced, with the goal being to get as much life out of those buses as reasonably possible, and I assume that they will do that.
Then if you haven't understood that, I've made a very bad presentation in not getting everybody to understand that this is the recommendation of the transportation department. John has gone back through his head mechanic, and they've looked at this. John is convinced that this is what we need. I am convinced that this is what we need.
All right, I don't want to belabor the issue, but I got the feeling before that, it was kind of said that the board wants to do that, they're taking their own risk of doing that. And I don't want to be threatened, or the board to be threatened in that kind of, it just bothered me a little bit.
Well, that's not implied as a threat, but it is to certainly enunciate the responsibility that I think I have to come to you and recommend that we buy new buses. I take it that serious, that is the criteria that I'm going to use. I'm not going to replace buses just because it's time to replace buses.
Enough. I agree. I don't want to belabor. I just had expressed that viewpoint. Couple of corollary questions, since we're talking about buses. If we need 5 new buses, we need 5 new buses. I don't think that's, you've got to transport the kids, we've got to transport the kids. And if it's more economical, it makes more sense to use 9 or 12 passenger vans and the other vans than using 19 ones, so be it. I can't debate that issue. One of the questions I have, though, we had some discussion early on, and I don't know if this is the proper time, but I want to bring it out. So we're talking about buses. We talked about relocating our bus fleet into different locations to save on fuel and save on time and save on other things. Is that going anywhere, or is that any more thought been to that except the general concept?
That's Art.
Yes, Mrs. Mangle has contacted Senator Hull, and he in turn has
He's going to do that for us?
contacted the
He's going to do that for us?
Well, the piece of land that we're interested in is owned by PennDOT.
Okay, I'm just.
So he has in turn contacted the Secretary of Transportation, and we're waiting.
But there were more than one location, wasn't there?
Well, that was the prime location.
That was the prime. Okay, so that's in, that concept is still moving forward.
That's moving.
Can I break, I need to just interrupt you for 1 minute.
All right.
I've been having conversation with Dr. Bose and Ken Weir, and I know I've been distracting, and I owe you an apology. But the gentlemen who are videoing us tonight have to break the cameras down so they can reset them up for the mock Republican convention. It was Democrat back when we did it back in the day. Anyway, so Ken is out there right now trying to find out from Bob on how late, in all fairness to these two guys, we could stay. And I've been distracting, so keep
Just
going.
as long as I'm on TV,
Ken will
please
give me
take
an
one.
answer, all right?
Yeah.
So, okay, reconvene.
That's fine, I don't care.
Where were you?
The, one other item just related to buses, the Ryder contract. And the concept of letting Ryder take more, that kind of scares me a little bit. Once you get locked into a consultant, then you're locked into price increases unless you go out and buy another fleet of buses. And all I'm saying is I would be conservative in expanding with a consultant.
That's obviously a difficult topic to talk about until we have more information
Right.
on, but it's also, excuse me, a difficult topic in terms of the people that work for us at the bus garage. They have a very high level of sensitivity to further inroads as far as contracted services are concerned. So, I have not shared that conversation with anybody to this point in time, and was not anxious to do it until we had a little bit more information we could tell the board about it.
All right, I support for this on the agenda.
Okay, Bill.
A couple of questions, if I could. We've talked about bus maintenance and how many miles we get before. And I will ask the question, could we get, let's put it this way, could we get significantly more mileage and years out of our buses with an improvement in our maintenance facilities and capabilities and equipment?
The best way I can answer that is in my opinion, we got rid of them too quickly in the past. We had a very, very liberal and generous replacement cycle. That's changed. That changed. One, we tripped it, we pushed it, and now we pushed it further. So we're kind of based on current replacement cycles, we're pushing it. And our maintenance is as good as it's going to get.
So it's not a question that there's not some type of equipment out there and that we could buy, that we make an initial investment and get a payback because we're not turning buses over so quickly?
We probably could, if you want to get serious about replacing engines and so forth, which we've never done. significant changes to the vehicle, maintaining the frame, chassis, on body, and literally replacing everything else, that would be a significant reduced cost. Sure, we could run the water. I need to add, I've talked to at least 8 or 9 districts that are allowed locally, and absolutely no one runs their 19 passengers as long as we do. No.
For mileage.
No, they don't worry about mileage. 10 years, they're gone. Mileage has never been a consideration because the 19-passenger buses that we move Judy's children around in, they build up miles tremendous compared to the big buses.
Right.
Some of those buses, I have one runs, is going to run easily 20,000 miles this year and more. They accumulate mileage faster, and they hit replacement cycles quicker. And they're not built the same. They're not really a school bus. They're a van.
Thank you. My second question is, has there ever been any discussions with Ryder with consideration given to working with the 4 main elementary Catholic schools in the area about adjusting their starting times so that we could have less Ryder runs?
Repeated. True. Yes, it's been addressed. There's been efforts made on their part. I don't know how serious. I need to talk to Dr. Mandrello to find out how serious that was. But that is the bulk of their kids that they move. I can look into it for you.
I think I would like to know if it's possible, or it's just not being done, or are we at maximum utilization of the rider system right now? It's a significant expense. I think we can address it. I don't know what we can do about it, but I think we ought to know. Thank you.
Vicki?
Just want to ask, Fred, what was the intended use of 9-passenger? I have to agree with Donna. That seems like it's restricting you down to such a limited ridership. And I know that we do have a lot of those hot, very expensive trips that we make to some of these special schools or private schools. And this was intended for student transportation, though?
It's to replace buses that we're now using where we're only transporting a few youngsters, so that the 9-passenger itself, and John, correct me if I'm saying something wrong here, the 9-passenger itself is going to be more than sufficient for the runs that we were using on the 19-passenger buses.
But runs and students, that changes, you know, as far as what you'd have to transport from one year to the next that could fall on a route or fall into some sort of convenient driving pattern. And that's why I'd say that to maybe call it based on exactly there where there may be uses for transportation to one of our private schools, that, you know, that 9 is going to cut you off and you're not going to be able to do it with 1. So I'd just like to see it at least reviewed. I guess perhaps there's no harm even in evaluating bids for both some at the same time, and then letting the board just decide, and that way we're not.
We have vans moving 1 child.
Pardon?
We have vans
I know.
moving 1 child. Quite a few. We pay the cab company big bucks to move 1 child.
Well, I know we do have
I would
the
like
cab
to.
rides for 1 child. Well, that you only need a car, but I mean.
Car, station wagon, or van. I would like to start with 5 and down the road have about 20 of these vans. 5 this year to get started.
No, I'm
Vicki,
moving.
I would hope,
I
and
just-
I don't know if it's possible or not, but I would hope that during the budget discussions, that we can find an adequate amount of time to have John explain what we do with transportation, and in words and language that you've never heard before, and perhaps that you don't have any kind of understanding about at this point. It's an expensive operation, and there are very few ways to cut the expenses, unfortunately. But as John talks now about one youngster on 1 bus, that happens. Cabs that we pay $24,000 a year sometimes too. Well, you've approved the
I've
bids,
seen them.
you've approved the contract. But if we can find the time so that you have a better understanding of what the transportation department does, I would appreciate that time.
That's fine. I thought I'd ask exactly for sure that it was intended for student transportation, because there could be other uses within the district that transportation would deal with. And so I'd have a better understanding of the size that you were asking for. And I'd just like to ask, is I recalled, I thought Griffith, it was a part of Griffith's report to the board where they designated the number of buses to be sold. It was a part of their cost analysis of our profit. So it was actually our consultant Griffith who made the recommendation or incorporated as a part of the evaluation of going to that brought forward
I think
X number of
we
vehicles.
probably even kept more than they recommended.
If I may, the recommendation was 22, but we were a little alarmed and we reduced it to 16 based on the earlier question about we knew there was going to be a decrease in middle schools.
Okay, I thought there was a total of 40. I know that those buses that went at an average of $1,000 per bus, but that was what the estimated, because it was put in the budget at X number of dollars. And that was pretty upsetting when I saw it there, $1,000. If it's still running, it seems like it's going to have some better value staying here. But I did think it was unfair that I think Griffith drove a lot of that in at the time when he made the recommendations. And I guess a desperate board in some cases went forward and didn't recognize the future need. I'm fine with this going on the agenda. I don't know whether we want to leave the just stated as vans, or whether you want to designate it that it will be 9-passenger vans that you're bidding on. But either way.
John?
Again?
Questions are
Your question's been, okay, I just have two. I try to drive over, and John, I apologize, I could have called you and asked you this question before the meeting, but I try to drive around and check out the compound. I call it the bus compound at off times. In the morning, after all the buses do head out, and they're going out picking up kids, how many spares do we actually have sitting there in the lot that you're for various reasons you obviously have some spares? How many spares do we have?
It depends on the day, but 10's a good number. We have 106 buses and use 96 of them every day. But I need to go beyond that. We really have 10 that are bona fide spares.
But so if we became a real stingy, super tight board and said, well, you're not going to get 5 buses, the 84 for this year, even though there's an increased enrollment and reconfiguration, would we still have buses to transport the students? And we wouldn't.
No, because I only have 6 or 7 large buses. I have 6 or 7 or 8 large buses for spares. Some days 8 of them go in sports runs. We have had days this year where there hasn't been a bus in the compound, which is the first year we've ever done.
So some days I may see 10. Other days I won't see any.
It would be a rare day that you saw 10. Most days you would probably see 2. Plus, there's always 4 in for PM. There's always 4 buses in a cycle inside. Most days you see 2 or 3.
Okay. I think I've heard that there's enough consensus for it to be on the agenda. I don't think we need to discuss it any further. Sharice?
I agree with you, Mr. Burns, but I would like to know if there is an absolute urgency for us to discuss items number 4 and number 5 this evening. They are very complex issues.
Right, well, okay.
I think you have consensus.
Okay, yeah, we do
to put this item
consensus.
on the agenda.
Right.
But, I mean, I have a lot of questions about number 4 and number 5 myself.
There are no votes being taken with
No,
that.
I know.
As finance,
Tonight we're
no.
supposed to work for them, and, there's something about the 11 o'clock hour with meat pills in the coffee or something, because there's not much tolerance after 11 o'clock around here, so, myself included in that.
So you're going to recommend that we move items
I would
4 and
like
5 to the work session for April?
Yes, in April. Please.
Well, only reason,
That's a problem.
Well, the budget.
with the budget area,
Yeah, it is.
the budget
We're
thing,
talking about
we need to
starting
move on the budget.
in April.
Can I,
Well, what action are we being
can
asked?
Dennis, you convey this? This is for information purposes anyway. You weren't expecting a vote on
No, I
March's.
just wanted to know your feelings
meeting.
on the format as presented. I
Let me-
worked with Don and Vicky on this.
Yeah, let me,
Hold on a second. Before we go any further, do we have any more questions of Fred or John? Because if we're finished with John, if John needs to get going, he can. Any more questions for Fred or John? Pardon me?
I'm driving in the morning, I need to get to sleep.
get those buses
Okay,
on.
thank you,
I just
John.
have one
Thank you,
question.
John. Oh, okay.
Just
Go
one
ahead.
question. No, seriously. What do we spend approximately on maintenance for our buses every year? Ballpark?
Good question. $3,000 a bus.
Thank you.
That's absolutely ballpark. We need to go beyond that.
3 times
And a new engine runs about, what, $10,000-$15,000?
That's high. Well, the bigger buses.
The 84s I'm talking about. I know average is 5 to 10, but on the bigger ones it'd be 10 to 15,000.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, John.
You bet.
Thank you, Fred.
Thank you.
But you have to stay. Okay, now, hold on a sec. Just hold on. Wait.
If number 5 is an FYI item, doesn't require action by us next week.
Yeah, let me
Unless
explain number
everybody
5.
has-
Let me explain number 5 for you, because I was probably the instigator of this more than anybody else. Is that it was my concern that we get started, as Pat Mosey brought up, we get started with the budget review as quickly as possible, and we had a schedule laid out that got us starting in April sometime and going on, and the hope was we could get started in March with some of this budget review earlier, and that it was also my concern that I had, in past years, even during the budget here last year, I said a little bit of it. The budget is so complex, and we went from page 6 to page 50 to page 40 to trace numbers around the budget, and I frankly got lost or get confused in this budget process and review process. So I, along with Vicki, asked Dennis to come up with a method top-down that we could look at each department, number of employees, what each department is spending, and then review each department, and if we needed detail behind those numbers, that's all available. But I just wanted to stop at a top-down level. Let's look at the transportation department, the number of employees, the number of expenses, whatever it is that keeps to run that department, have a total costing on that. So what you have for information only, not to vote on, is a top-down concept for looking at the budget, so you can look at a department, determine what the costs are, what the employees are, down to all supplies and everything, and compare it what it was to this year to next year. Obviously, you may need some definition of what those numbers mean behind it, but the thing that I wanted to get board approval on and to get Dennis started with is to use this concept as the top level down, and then take a department in detail as we start this review process, and then if you have questions below, we can get them. But that's why I didn't want to defer this to April, because I want to give Dennis
Okay, well, no, I understand
the
that, but I wasn't
direction
sure.
to use this top concept down. And if you have questions related to the definition on that, I would encourage you to review those with Dennis. If you want to bring them here, that's fine. But that was the purpose behind it. That's what the review thing is.
Mr. President?
Thank you.
Yes, Vicki.
Finance liaison, I'd like to also just say that this will not be replacing or eliminating the line-by-line budget. That budget will still be, of course, compiled. It will still be there. There will still be full access to it. And it can be determined at a later date whether you wanted to use your budget review process using the department format, or if there was a need to involve the line-by-line budget as we go through. What I think is important was that if there were any strong disagreements with it, we certainly don't want Dennis going off and moving in this direction only to find that no one's happy, or
But
doesn't
you
want
and
it.
Don
So-
agreed this is the direction we should
Right.
take.
Right, it's a new supplemental material, actually, that gives you a more compartmentalized overview of, by
Right, right.
department, of where your budget dollars are going. And it'll also give you by school, your number of staff members that are in.
Right, it'll give you mostly
and
what you've been
salaries.
asking for the past couple of years, those of you who have been here
Well,
a couple
how
of
much
years.
more do we need to discuss that?
So that
tonight?
we can,
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
The only thing I was saying, and maybe wrap this up, is that I had called Don when we got it, and it was, Don said it's a basic working format. And I think that if there's something we want more detail on, or we want you to elaborate more on, we can handle that to a phone call today.
right.
That's fine.
I don't know why we got to debate this tonight.
Right, that's
And
fine.
then, as you look at it, if
I
you
mean,
have,
discuss it or whatever.
if you have concerns, call
There
me.
was just one thing under the budget that
Mhm.
I still had a question about. Mrs. Shear, have you received the numbers from Dennis or Fred on the contract impacts
Teacher's
for our
contract,
budget
yeah.
this year?
No, I have not. Dennis?
She has not.
Mr. Clemens, I would like to see consensus from this board right now to give the finance director and the personnel director direction to afford this board those financial impacts from the contract signed last year before we go into the budget process for this board, for this board's knowledge.
Number 2.
And to be available for the public's knowledge prior to going into our budget process, because I believe that we all have the right to know, and the public has the right to know, the impacts, the financial impacts across the board, including extra duty pay. I want to see those numbers too, going into this process, what that contract means going into this process, because that's a fixed cost. That's a fixed cost, and I would like that separated out publicly for us and the public before we even go into that. And so I would like you to try to gain consensus on that. I mean, we've talked about it. and
You're asking for
need
that as
direction.
something that could it be included on our Friday packet before the April meeting?
Well, yeah, I mean, as soon as possible would be great. I mean, we've only, Mrs. Shear's only been asking for it since the contract was approved
Okay.
last year.
I support that, Mr.
Who else
Clement.
supports that?
I support
John? Don?
Fine with me.
Everybody, it sounds like, okay.
If the figures, well, I
Dennis,
appreciate
Fred,
it now that it's
You'll take care of
formalized.
that?
Yes, I will.
It'd be nice by Friday if you could.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Don't leave this subject yet, please.
Okay, then let's stay on it. Bill?
Because we have our board liaison broken down into certain areas, because that's the way we have our administration broken down. When I look through this proposed budget layout, there's certain areas I'd like to see broken out between elementary and secondary ed.
Won't that be broken down by school, Dennis?
Well, when I look at the first item,
Right.
the teachers' salaries and benefits and such, if we could, is it a big to-do to break it down between elementary and secondary ed?
That will still be done, Bill. That'll,
Okay.
Mr. Allen, that'll be, the line by line, which breaks everything out school by school, will still be there.
Okay.
Whoever wants to see it is, if you ask, it'll be there.
So what you're saying is if I want it, I'll total it myself, right?
No, we'll be
I
total.
can do it. If it's there, I can do it.
No, the old budget format, I still need that to do my state report, so that will still be done. This is being done to help you as board members
Okay.
be able to look at things in total.
Still available.
And, right,
Okay.
and question those items.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Are we going to attempt to
Okay.
finalize on funding of Pendale, or are we going to?
I was gonna ask.
Okay, okay, folks,
we
we
haven't done
we
this.
need to be thinking twofold right now. Yes, we need to, I think there's consensus that we need to wrap this up for now, for tonight.
Right.
Ken has informed me that the gentlemen filming have to be finished by 11 o'clock. In just all fairness to them, they have to get the equipment back over to the high school. So we have to wrap this up, and I want to talk to the audience for a minute to, just to get some comments. What else do we need to really need to talk about on the budget?
Nothing on the budget.
Okay. What do we need to talk about on Pendale?
Well,
Can't that wait?
Yeah.
Can wait, that's,
Okay.
We
Okay.
there's nothing due to that
Okay.
till July.
All right, we're gonna,
July.
the biggest part of this conversation
July.
on the budget was
that can wait till next
Dennis
July.
and Fred, you have your marching orders, and Bill, Dennis clarified that for you. So is
I'm fine.
everybody okay that we
I'm
can?
fine. Yes.
Okay, let's conclude this meeting at this point. I'm gonna open it up to the audience, the citizens, but I'm gonna ask that if you really feel that you have to come forward tonight, if you would be brief in respect to the men, keeping in mind that you can comment on anything on next Thursday night. So I would ask for your consideration on that.
And we're gonna cut the cameras at 11.
Yes, yes.
Well, I'm off, okay. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a very interesting meeting. Again, delayed past the bedtime. I was very interested to see tonight in the handouts that as part of the presentation for the addition to the high school for the 800 students, there were listed advantages for doing so, but no disadvantages. A couple key disadvantages I think that should have been brought up was that we're already seeing property values decrease in this area, specifically, I'm sorry, H. Bruce Gordon, Montgomery Township. We're already seeing property values decreasing the minute the board decided not to build a second high school. Conversations around neighborhoods, specifically mine, is showing that people that are moving are losing value on their houses because of the fact that we're going to build a huge second high school, huge primary high school, looking to put 3,400 students in there. Bigger is not better. I believe the students develop a better identity when they're in smaller groups. There'll be less opportunity for participation in various programs such as chorus, drama, and team sports because you're trying to meet a bigger population. Enrollments are based on existing enrollments. You're watching numbers grow that were discussed coming up through the elementary schools and so on. I hear now that one of the numbers that's being taken into consideration is the Pell numbers, the Pell mid-range numbers. Seems to me that the board didn't want to consider those numbers when they canceled the opportunity for the second high school. Now suddenly a 1994 number that was no good in 1995 is now good in 1996. I find that very discouraging. Keeping in mind an item that we're postponing tonight, selling the Keenest Road site will be a cause, if you do that, will be a cause for larger population growth, and that developers will jump in there. There are already plans that are before zoning committees, zoning boards such as Montgomery Township for 3 major developments. A lot of it's commercial, but they are looking to put housing in there, and that may not have been taken into consideration yet, so that further enrollment growth will be going on. I suggest that board members that were elected on the basis of holding the line on taxes and so on, poll the community, poll their constituents before spending $15 million, $18 million to develop a pod in a high school to hold an additional 800 kids that may not meet our needs. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Joanne Orr, and I reside in Lansdale. I wanted to address my question or comments to Dr. Bond. Has he stepped out or left?
I think he
Maybe left.
I think he's had a very long run.
Okay, well then I'm going to share it with the rest of you. Do you all have the first floor plan of the high school? I'd like to propose the concept of enclosing 8 to 10 feet on the perimeter of essentially the first floor of ED pod as an alleviation of traffic flow, at least on the first floor. That could be done during the summer, like the proposed cafeteria expansion could be done in 2 summers. I'd also like to champion my concept of 3-site expansion. I know I come from a science family, and I tend to want to group it where I feel it really belongs. I think the students, when you grow larger, need to be more organized. They need your stewardship for organization and planning. I'd like to see a 2-story as opposed to 3. I really feel students should have the same opportunity to get out for fire, to be responded to for medical or security purposes. I think there needs to be considered another elevator. There's 433 square feet in that high school with 1 elevator, and you're proposing a 40,000 square foot addition with 1 elevator. I think it's disproportionate. That's my comments. Thank you.
Just one quick response, there will be a second elevator.
Okay, for the 433 existing. Okay. Can you comment on the enclosed perimeter of CDE pod?
It's interesting that you would bring that up. We have already discussed the possibility of doing that.
Okay, I did with your assistant a couple of weeks ago.
We're really talking about
doing perimeter.
I mean, Dr. Bond and I met, and we talked about our problem is the bottleneck that exists when you come down from D&E and the cafeteria area into the main lobby, and we had talked about an outside
Okay,
corridor.
you could run one along F to H.
Could Art respond? Maybe he could talk to you afterwards for a little
I
bit.
talked to Mrs. Ura regularly.
I'm on the action team for facilities, so
Art,
I see a lot of them.
Would be glad to get back to you on that.
Yeah, but I want it really considered, because that's something that could be done during the summer, and it would affect, this expansion thing isn't going to come about for 3 years.
Okay.
And I feel it needs to be addressed.
Thank you.
Time for one more. Mr. Hammond.
Good evening. I'm Chuck Hammond from Montgomery Township. Today's kind of a traumatic day in my life. I've spent 18 years at AEL, and today's my anniversary, and I have to agree with Bill and David this evening, which I find very traumatic. I totally agree on some of the comments earlier about the difference between the 600 and 800 being on your numbers that you are going to present next week. To me, that looks like 7 classrooms. If I was an architect and you said to me, give me a school with between 600 and 800 students in it, I don't know if I could do that for you, because again, you're planning a building and 800 students, between the difference between the 200 students involves 7 additional classrooms. Now, if I'm designing a building and I got to figure out what to do with 700 or 200 other kids, that's 7 classrooms, folks. I either have them or I don't. I mean, personally, I would rather see you almost build a school for 1,000 students and go to 20 million and have enough, and then Dr. Bond will not have to worry about we're at capacity. We keep talking about experts. Again, Dr. Bond is sort of an expert. Why is a $10,000 expert going to convince us on how we should have the school, whether we should go up or down? And we have experts here saying we're at capacity at 800. If 800 is the number we've all come up with, how can we word something as 600 to 800? That's 200 or 7 classrooms, ladies and gentlemen. I don't see that. I guess that's probably all the comments I want to make tonight so we can get out of here. But quite honestly, 200 difference between the numbers, again, to me, is 7 classrooms. If I was your architect, I'd laugh. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson, did you? I'll allow Mr. Anderson, and that will be our final.
I ceded my position to Mr. Actually, it was up, but I let him take his place in front. Just a couple of quick things I wanted to point out. I really think by trying to hold the dollars constant, you're holding the wrong end of the hose. It's the students who are coming, and it's the money we have to figure out how we can spend most efficiently. But you know, as he said, we can't pretend only 600 are going to show up and then wonder what to do with the remaining 200. We can ask for targets, I think, but I'm hearing too much about this running the school district as a business. A school district is not a business, ladies and gentlemen. You can apply good business principles to it, but it is a governmental body. It provides services to a growing population. It's not like building an expansion on a meat packing facility where you can decide to run 1,000 more head an hour and let that be your decision. You have to handle who comes here, and you have to be prepared to deal with it. I look at this as a flood control project. We're building a levee here, and we can't command the river not to rise as high as it wants to rise, and we have to be prepared to deal with it, or the implications of the flood, I think, will overwhelm us. I also question some of the advantages that were stated here. I think we have an example immediately to our east in Central Bucks, where some of these advantages do not apply, where they made a different decision than we did. And I question why there are no relative disadvantages stated, because I heard many tonight. The last thing I said at the last time we had a work session on this topic was that I looked at the plan from last year of expanding the high school, and $10 million worth of things had disappeared from it, including new band and chorus rooms, including an extra gymnasium. And I asked why it was and what had changed about our educational mission in 1 year, that all those things that were thought to be necessary a year ago are no longer considered necessary. And tonight I heard the answer. They are still necessary. Everybody seems to agree we don't have capacity in exactly those areas that were proposed to be expanded. And I plead with you not to hold the wrong end of the hose until we see whether or not we can reach our mission and still provide those services rather than providing additional limitations. I would like to remind you, and I'm sure Mr. Kelly can back me up on this, that to borrow $4 million worth of money requires only $1 million increase in our taxes per year. So if we are arguing about 16 versus $18 million, we are arguing about $500,000 tax impact. That is absolutely the truth, Mr. Mosey, and I can do the math for you, and I think that needs to be considered when we make these decisions and not be penny wise and pound
Mr. Anderson,
foolish.
do you know what a mill is in this school district?
$280,000.
How can you say $1 million is 1 mill?
Because we finance at a rate of 7% of the principal borrowed per year.
Yeah, but that's not the
but the millage is still
Okay,
passed on.
folks, in all fairness to Mr. Anderson, he has about a minute left.
I don't intend to use that, man. I just, as you know, I'm the co-chair of the Long-Term Planning Committee of the Finance, and I've looked carefully into these things, and I'd like us to consider schools are financed for a reason and over time for a reason. They provide services to the community over time, and there's a legitimate reason to borrow money to provide for these things. I don't want us to, try to save the last $300,000 if that will make the difference in better educational benefits. I'd like the needs of the children to have a good education be considered as we make these decisions.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Okay, a call for motion to adjourn. Second. All those in favor say aye. We're adjourned. Sorry, guys, we went 5 minutes over.